Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
No one suspects betrayal until it slices like a silent blade. Never did I imagine stepping through my own door would feel so lethal. Fiona's laughter once soothed me, but that evening it destroyed everything. He was my commanding officer, a trusted ally now tangled with my wife. One explosive moment of rage nearly demolished my world. The cost? My career, my reputation, my very sanity. I vowed to expose every secret, no matter the price. When power collides with betrayal, no one escapes unscathed. I stand before you, undone yet unbroken. Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. I always thought betrayal would announce itself in dramatic fashion like a thunderstorm, full of roars and flashes of lightning. But the day I found out my wife, Fiona, was sleeping with Captain Joseph Harper was eerily quiet. There were no slammed doors or raised voices when I first walked into the house, just the distant hum of our air conditioner and the tap of my shoes across our hardwood floor. I'd come home early from my shift at the precinct. Officially, I was a detective with the St. Clair Police Department back then, known for methodical work and a no-nonsense attitude. Unofficially, I was a guy who adored his wife probably too much, if there's such a thing. That afternoon, I wanted to surprise Fiona with takeout from her favorite Thai place and maybe catch a show on Netflix. Nothing special, just a snapshot of domestic life I'd cherished for years. The first sign something was off came when I placed the takeout bags on our kitchen counter. Usually, Fiona would call out from somewhere in the house as soon as she heard me. She was never one to be shy about greeting me, even if she was in the middle of folding laundry or reading. This time, though, it was dead quiet, like she'd vanished into thin air. I remember checking the time, just before 4 p.m., which was earlier than usual for me to be back. My mind flickered. She's probably just napping. But I felt a nudge of disquiet, a shadow over my heart that I couldn't quite place. I stepped down the hallway with the kind of carefulness I'd use during an active investigation, footsteps soft, breathing steady. There was no reason for stealth, yet some deeper instinct told me to keep quiet. Maybe I already sensed something was horribly wrong. When I pushed open our bedroom door, I saw them. Fiona's hair, a tangle of red-brown waves, was splayed across our rumpled white sheets. Her face was turned away from me, but I recognized the curve of her shoulder, the dip at her waist. Captain Harper, a man I'd once respected, had his hands on her hips, and they were both so caught up in each other they didn't even hear me come in. For a moment, my whole world froze. I was suspended between shock and fury, my mind racing to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. The initial thought that flickered was nonsensical. That's my side of the bed. The second thought slammed into me like a sledgehammer. They're having sex in our home. My boss, my wife. I don't recall how many seconds passed before they noticed me. It felt like an eternity of suffocating stillness. Then Fiona jerked upright, eyes going wide with a terror I'd never seen before. Harper tried to scramble for the sheets, but I was already moving. The violence that erupted in me was like a primal force. I lunged across the small space between the door and the bed, my fists connecting with Harper's jaw before I even registered the contact. There was no polite, "What the hell is going on?" or any chance for them to explain. I was past conversation. I was raw, guttural rage. Harper managed to swing an arm and push me back, but my adrenaline was sky high. I remember hearing Fiona scream my name in sheer panic, but the sound barely registered. All I could see was Harper's smug face, twisted in shock. This man had shared beers with me, had asked about Fiona like a concerned friend, had told me he respected my commitment. Now I knew all that respect was a lie. One punch landed against his ribcage with a sickening thud, enough to send him stumbling. Another clipped his cheek. At some point, Harper wrestled free and reached for his pants pocket, probably instinct, as a cop who knows the weight of a gun. That triggered a deeper, lethal reflex in me. I pinned his wrist to the floor so hard I heard something crack. That might have been the moment Fiona tried to grab my arm, screaming, "Marcus, stop! Stop before you kill him!" But I was beyond reason. I was seeing everything in red. In that single instant, everything about my life with her replayed in my head our wedding day. The evenings we spent planning for a future, the jokes we shared about naming our first child. Now it was all poison. It was Harper's frantic gasping that brought me back to my senses. He was pinned under my knee, coughing, and I realized I'd twisted his wrist so hard that tears pricked at his eyes. The rage was still there, but the rational detective in me forced me to release him. By then, the noise must have been deafening. Fiona shrieking, me breathing like a bull, Harper wincing on the floor. I stood and backed away, feeling the side of my own mouth. Blood. I must have taken a blow I hadn't noticed. Time felt warped. There was no sense of the minute or hour, just the pounding of my heart and the nauseating reality that my marriage was over. Harper grunted, "Pierce, you don't know what you're doing," and tried to scramble for his shirt. I wanted to laugh in his face. Did he think he could reason with me? Apologize? I was too shattered to find words, and I nearly lunged at him again, but I caught sight of Fiona clutching the bedsheets to her chest, tears streaming down her cheeks flushed with shame or fear, I couldn't tell. It stopped me, like a punch to the gut. Part of me still loved her in that twisted instant. Another part of me wanted to scream that she'd ruined everything. Eventually, Harper grabbed his clothes, half limping, half rushing from the room. Fiona tried to speak, but I walked out without waiting for her to finish. I remember throwing open the front door so hard it banged against the wall, then stumbling onto the porch, gulping for fresh air that couldn't possibly cleanse what I'd seen. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't answer it. Probably the precinct or a friend checking in. It's surreal how everyday technology continues to beep and ring, oblivious to the cataclysm happening in your personal life. I sank onto the porch steps, pressed my palms to my forehead, and tried to breathe. This was it, my entire sense of stability destroyed in a matter of minutes. I felt the sting in my knuckles and realized they were bleeding from punching Harper. My mind swirled with confusion, heartbreak, and the raw desire to pummel him again. And then the dread rolled in. Harper was my commanding officer. Even if he was scum, he had power, contacts, influence. I was no stranger to departmental politics. It wouldn't take him long to spin the story in his favor. My blood turned cold with that realization. I should have cared about the consequences, but in that moment, I only felt the burning humiliation of being betrayed. "Marcus?" I heard Fiona's voice behind me. She was standing in the doorway, wrapped in a robe. Her hair was still disheveled, and her eyes were puffy. I didn't turn to look at her. She said, I'm sorry, I didn't want you to find out like—" I shot up from the steps, spun around so fast she jumped back. "You didn't want me to find out?" I spat each word like venom. She let out a broken sob, but I didn't stick around to comfort her. Fury pulsed through my veins, and I needed to leave before I did something I couldn't take back. I strode down the sidewalk, ignoring her pleas for me to come back and talk. The takeout tie was probably still sitting on our kitchen counter, going cold like the leftover scraps of our marriage. My mind was blank except for a looping reel of them in bed together. That was the day my world collapsed, not with a thunderous storm, but in a suffocating hush of heartbreak and betrayal. If I had known how far the fallout would go, maybe I'd have tried to handle things differently. But that day, the only thought in my head was that I'd lost the two things I'd most valued, my wife and my peace of mind. I took one last look at our home, my home, and felt the strangest sense that I was being locked out of my own life. Then I forced myself to keep walking, block after block, until I no longer recognized the houses or the faces. By nightfall, I'd find a friend's couch or a cheap motel, anything to avoid returning to that bed where I'd caught them. In my pocket, the phone buzzed again. I wanted to smash it. I didn't want to hear from anyone. And I had no idea that in the hours ahead, I'd get calls from the precinct, from Harper's associates, from lawyers' calls that would set the stage for my professional ruin. My only clarity was a cold vow forming in my mind. I will make them both regret this. The morning after I caught Fiona with Captain Harper felt like emerging from a nightmare, except I woke up in a dingy motel room that smelled of stale cigarettes. And the nightmare was real. I'd slept in my clothes, tossing all night, replaying the confrontation over and over, heart thumping with residual rage. My phone had rung at least a dozen times. I ignored every call. By 7 a.m., I forced myself to face reality. I turned my phone on. The first message I saw was from an unfamiliar number. "Marcus, we need to talk immediately." At the tail end of the text, I recognized Harper's name in the signature. He had the gall to contact me personally, didn't even bother going through official channels. I didn't reply. Instead, I called the precinct's HR department. A numbness settled over me as I listened to them confirm that there were developments regarding my employment. When I finally arrived at the police station around mid-morning, it was like walking into a place I'd never seen. Some officers gave me sympathetic looks, others averted their gaze. Word travels fast in the halls of law enforcement, especially when it involves a scandal. I overheard murmurs. I heard Marcus nearly killed Captain Harper. And Fiona Pierce? No way. It felt like being under a microscope, every step magnified by tension. Eventually, I found myself in a cramped conference room with two uniformed officers I recognized, and a slick attorney who introduced herself as Miss Braxton. She had a crisp navy blazer, sharp eyes, and a voice devoid of warmth. She explained, in carefully measured tones, that the department considered my outburst to be a serious assault on a superior officer, one that could not be swept under the rug. I wanted to argue that Harper initiated everything by betraying me and by reaching for his gun, but I knew better. This was about optics. A detective beating up his captain because of a personal affair? That's the kind of scandal that tears an entire precinct apart. Miss Braxton folded her hands. Marcus, the city would like this resolved with minimal public attention. Captain Harper has taken medical leave for his injuries, and there is talk of a civil suit if we don't manage this properly. I clenched my fists under the table. I started to speak, but realized any justification would fall on deaf ears. The department didn't care who was morally right or wrong, only who posed the bigger liability. Right now, that was me. One of the uniformed officers cleared his throat. We value your years of service, Pierce. You've done a lot of good. But from a legal standpoint, he hesitated, flicking his gaze to Miss Braxton. She took over. We propose a settlement to avoid a drawn-out trial or internal inquiry. Essentially, you'd resign from the force, quietly, and in exchange, the city will compensate you with a severance package. You'd also sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding Captain Harper's personal affairs. It felt like they were handing me a time bomb. My entire career, everything I'd worked for, offered up as a sacrificial lamb to keep Harper's reputation from drowning in scandal. The bitterness in my throat tasted like bile. Yet I also knew that if I fought this, Harper would drag me through the mud. He'd claim I was unstable, that I'd attacked him unprovoked. Fiona might even back him up to save her own skin. My mind spun. If I refused the settlement, I'd face possible criminal charges or a departmental hearing that would ruin me. If I accepted, I'd lose my badge, but I'd walk away with a lump sum that might let me start over. I'd be labeled disgraced, but at least I wouldn't end up in jail. My stomach churned at the thought of letting that snake Harper stay on the job while I was forced out. Marcus, Miss Braxton said, the terms are generous given the situation. You'll want to speak with your own lawyer, but we suggest a prompt resolution for everyone's sake. I stared at the form she slid across the table. The words seemed to blur resignation, severance, NDA. My vision tunneled as I realized they wanted me gone by the end of the week. What about him? I demanded. What about Harper? She pursed her lips. Captain Harper is on leave. Any disciplinary matters are confidential. But we want to avoid a public scandal for the department, as I'm sure you do as well. Her expression gave away nothing, but I heard the subtext. This is how big fish stay safe. I was furious, but I felt cornered. The logical part of me recognized I'd gain little by fighting. They had the leverage of public image. I was simply a detective with a battered reputation. My personal heartbreak had no place in a legal context. And as for Fiona, my stomach twisted at the mention of her name. She'd probably testify that I used excessive force in my jealous rage. Swallowing my pride, I mumbled, I want to see the settlement numbers. Miss Braxton nodded, turning a page. My eyes scanned the figure, and a cold jolt went through me. It was higher than I expected, a sum that could buy me a modest house or seed money for a business, enough to keep me from working for a while. But no amount could compensate for the betrayal I felt, or the sense of injustice that Harper would remain unpunished. The days that followed were a blur of signatures, hushed conversations, and forced smiles from senior officers who'd known me for years, but now treated me like a leper. I avoided Fiona entirely. She moved out of the house before I returned. On my final morning, I packed up my desk in silent shame. Officers passed by, some whispering condolences, others not meeting my eyes. A handful tried to shake my hand, uncertain of the protocol for saying goodbye to a man tarred by scandal. "Marcus, you deserve better," one colleague said softly. I shrugged, unsure what to say. The best I could manage was, "Thanks," though the words felt hollow. The divorce came swiftly after. Fiona and I had no kids, no complicated assets besides the modest house we'd bought together. Our lawyers hammered out the details, dividing up our life like accountants splitting a pie chart. She apologized in a letter, or something close to an apology more like, "I never meant to hurt you. Things just got out of control." I tore it up without reading it twice. In the span of a month, I lost my career, my wife, and what remained of my trust in people. The settlement check sat on my kitchen counter, a mocking testament to how easily everything can be reduced to a dollar sign. I couldn't bring myself to deposit it at first. It felt like blood money, an admission that the city could buy my silence, buy my compliance. But eventually, bills came due. I was living in a small one-bedroom apartment by then, surrounded by boxes of my old life-framed commendations from the force, wedding pictures I couldn't look at anymore. So I walked into the bank one day and handed the teller that check, swallowing my pride in the process. A week later, I found myself staring at the new balance in my account. It was a decent chunk of change for a single guy with no job. People would say I was set, at least for a while, but all I felt was emptiness. No daily routine, no sense of purpose. Just a seething resentment toward Harper and Fiona, and the cold realization that I'd been cast aside. Word spread quickly in local law enforcement circles that I was unemployable. Nobody wanted to pick up a detective who'd assaulted his captain, no matter the circumstances. And so I drifted for a bit, living off my settlement, nursing old wounds. Eventually, the phone calls started private calls from acquaintances, neighbors, or old friends who needed help with minor investigations. Husbands suspecting their wives of hidden affairs, small business owners accusing employees of theft. At first, I turned them down, too depressed to function. But then I realized this might be my path forward. If the system didn't want me, I'd work outside it. Looking back, I can pinpoint that moment as the birth of Pierce investigations. Though I didn't have a formal office or business card yet, I was just a bitter ex-cop with a knack for finding things out. If I couldn't chase criminals under the official badge, I'd chase them in my own way. I still remember the final conversation with my lawyer, a curt man named Rodman, who said, "Marcus, sign this last page and we're done. You'll receive the rest of your settlement in installments. You can move on." Move on, I thought. Right. As if emotional scars vanish at the flick of a pen. But I signed, because I was exhausted, and because I needed closure, even if it was the shallowest form of it. That afternoon, I found myself walking past the old precinct building. My throat tightened, and for a second I pictured the life I should have had rising through the ranks, perhaps making captain in a few years. But now all of that was beyond reach. In the tinted reflection of the precinct's glass doors, I looked like a stranger. Tired eyes, tense shoulders, clothes rumpled from sleepless nights. "Move on," Rodman had said. Yet all I could think of was how I'd ended up paying the price for Harper's treachery. The city might have forced me out quietly, but the embers of anger still smoldered under my skin, and I knew deep down that betrayal leaves a mark that money or time can't erase. I spent my first few weeks of freedom in a haze, half-heartedly scrolling through job listings, half-heartedly cleaning my apartment, and wholeheartedly trying to drown out thoughts of Fiona and Harper. Most nights, I'd pop a frozen dinner into the microwave and stare at old detective textbooks or watch reruns of police procedurals. Pathetic, maybe, but it was my only way to cling to the world I used to belong to. Sleep came in fits. Some nights I'd dream about busting a perp, only to have the dream warp into a nightmare where Harper was behind me, mocking me. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, fumbling for the lamp. The worst part was realizing the next day stretched out with no official duty. No badge, no sense of direction. Around that time, I got a call from an old neighbor, Mrs. Hendricks. Her son had gone missing well, not truly missing, but he'd vanished for a couple of days on a gambling binge, and she was worried. "Marcus, you used to be a detective," she said. "Can't you look for him?" I hesitated, but the plea in her voice and the memory of all the times she'd helped me fix my old lawnmower weighed on me. I found myself driving across town, interviewing bartenders and poker buddies, eventually tracking her son to a shabby rental house. He was holed up there, broke and ashamed. When I brought him back to Mrs. Hendricks, she cried with relief. She tried to pay me, but all she could offer was $100 and a plate of homemade brownies. I accepted the brownies and told her not to worry about the money. That was my first unofficial PI job, and it felt strangely good. The puzzle solving, the footwork, the satisfaction of reuniting someone with family, it reminded me of what I loved about being a cop, minus the red tape. And yet every time I tasted that satisfaction, a pang of bitterness would strike. I should still be on the force, I'd think. It's not fair. In the midst of my aimless routine, I ran into Emily Collins. Or rather, she found me. I'd known her casually for a few years, a friend of a friend who worked in local journalism. She spotted me standing in line at a coffee shop near the old precinct. I was ordering a black coffee and a stale donut, hardly paying attention to anything around me. "Marcus?" I heard a tentative voice. Turning, I saw Emily blonde hair, sharp hazel eyes, and a concerned expression. She wore a casual blouse, and her press badge peeked out of her bag. "Emily," I managed, clearing my throat. "It's been a while." She looked at me, brows furrowing. "You look like you haven't slept." She was never one to sugarcoat. "I heard rumors about you leaving the force." "It's true," I said flatly, paying for my coffee. "Long story." We ended up grabbing a table where she coaxed the gist of the story out of me. Not all the gory details, but enough for her to understand Harper's betrayal and the department's hush-hush settlement. She listened quietly, never once looking at her phone or fiddling with her badge. It was comforting, if disconcerting, to have someone simply pay attention. When she finally spoke, it wasn't pity or prying. "That's awful," she said softly. "But you shouldn't hide away. You were a good detective, Marcus. People still respect your work." A bitter laugh escaped me. "People respect the uniform, not me. Now that I'm gone, they'd prefer I stay in the shadows." She shook her head. "Not everyone. Look, there's more to life than the precinct. If you can't be a detective on the force, maybe you can do it on your own terms. Don't let them take that from you, too." I shrugged, not sure how to respond. Part of me wanted to recoil from the entire idea opening up to someone again. But another part recognized that Emily was extending a lifeline of genuine concern. We parted ways with her pressing a slip of paper into my hand, her personal phone number. "Call if you need to talk, or if you find a big story for me," she said, forcing a small grin. In the days that followed, I dove into small investigative tasks. People in the neighborhood started to realize I was available. A missing cat case. Yes, you read that right, an elderly lady swore her Persian had been stolen. A suspicious spouse or two. A local bakery suspecting an employee of nightly theft. Each job was either hilarious or heartbreaking, but it kept me busy and gave me a reason to get up in the morning. During one of those trivial investigations trying to track down a stolen laptop from a music studio, I got a lead that took me to a rundown electronics shop. I remember thinking how grateful I was for any distraction from my personal mess, but that's where I bumped into Captain Harper's name again. The shop owner, an older man with a scraggly beard, recognized me from the neighborhood and said, "Aren't you that detective who had a fight with your captain? Word is, he's out on medical, might not come back." I forced a polite nod, trying not to let the anger show on my face. "That's so?" He shrugged. "Yeah, people talk. Heard the department is handling it quietly, but no one's seen Harper in weeks. Don't know if he's taking it hard or if it's hush money." The mention of hush money sent a jolt through me, but I bit my tongue. The last thing I wanted was to feed rumors. Still, I found a grim sense of triumph in hearing that Harper wasn't just walking around unscathed. Maybe the guilt was eating him alive. Maybe he was covering up worse skeletons. If he was losing sleep, good. At least we had that in common. Around that time, Fiona's name still haunted me. I'd spent so long building a life with her that every single day felt incomplete without a flash of her face crossing my mind. Sometimes I missed her, or at least the idea of her the woman I thought she was. Other times, I wished I could erase all those memories. The house we'd lived in was sold quickly, the proceeds split according to the divorce agreement. Another milestone that hammered home how thoroughly my old life was dismantled. Late one evening, after finishing a stakeout for a suspicious wife who turned out to be entirely faithful, I found myself flipping through my phone contacts. My finger hovered over Emily's number. I'd made a habit of ignoring people, but something about her conversation in the coffee shop stuck with me. She'd been the only one to say, "Don't hide away." So I called her. It was close to 10 p.m. and part of me worried she wouldn't pick up. But after 2 rings, she answered, sounding groggy yet concerned. "Marcus? Everything okay?" I took a breath. "Yeah, fine. Sorry if I woke you, I remembered you said I could call." Silence for a moment, then a soft laugh. "I'm glad you did. I was actually still up, just reading. Want to meet for a late coffee? Or is that too weird?" We ended up at a 24-hour diner a few blocks from my apartment. The place was nearly empty, which was perfect. Over lukewarm coffee and vinyl seats, we talked about everything and nothing: her job, my random cases, the city's constant noise. She didn't press about Harper or Fiona, and I found myself more relaxed than I'd been in months. That night, I realized something about Emily. She wasn't just friendly. She had an empathy that felt genuine, and an understated strength that put me at ease. As we parted ways near midnight, the air crisp and the streetlights casting a lonely glow, I felt a tiny sliver of warmth in my chest, something akin to hope. If Fiona's betrayal had taught me one thing, it was to be careful with trust. But a voice in the back of my head whispered that I couldn't let my entire future be dictated by that single act of disloyalty. Even if I wasn't ready to open my heart fully, maybe I could let someone in just enough to keep me from drowning in bitterness. I stepped into my apartment, the overhead light buzzing faintly, and set my phone on the kitchen counter. That's when I noticed the old police commendations stuffed in a box by the wall. For a moment I stared at them, remembering a time when I felt unstoppable, a detective on the rise. Now I was just Marcus Pierce, private investigator with a battered soul. But maybe that was okay, because at least I wasn't lying to myself anymore. Somewhere in the middle of that reflection, my phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Thanks for tonight. Good to see you again." I slid the phone away, feeling a strange blend of relief and sadness. A wounded pride, that's what I had. But maybe with enough time and the right people around me, I could nurse it back to something stronger. If there's one thing I learned as a detective, it's that life rarely hands you perfect timing. It just hurls situations at you and waits to see how you'll react. That's exactly what happened the day Detective Nick Barnes showed up at my doorstep. I was in the middle of a half-hearted attempt to reorganize my living room boxes, old files, and leftover furniture strewn everywhere. My phone was buzzing with a couple of new clients wanting me to chase petty leads. Then came the knock on my door, firm, precise. When I opened it, Nick's face carried a mix of regret and relief. He was still in uniform, brown hair clipped short, sharp gray eyes that used to hold an easy camaraderie with me. But now, they were cautious, as if he wasn't sure of the reception he'd get. "Hey, Pierce," he said, adjusting his stance. "Mind if I come in?" I stood aside, letting him step over the cluster of boxes. "Didn't expect a house call," I said warily. Nick was one of the few in the department who'd texted me to say he was sorry about how things turned out, but we hadn't met in person since my forced resignation. "I just wanted to check on you," he said, glancing around the cluttered space. "Heard you were doing some PI work. Figured you might appreciate a tip or two." He cut a respectful figure in my apartment, and for a moment I was reminded of how well we used to work together on homicide cases. Nick had always been the straightforward type, not prone to office politics, which was probably why he'd stayed clear of the fiasco with Harper. "Come on, let me make some coffee," I offered, leading him into my cramped kitchen. While it brewed, Nick shifted from foot to foot. Finally, he broke the silence. "Look, Marcus, I don't agree with how the higher-ups handled your situation. You got a raw deal, man. But I also wanted to say, I'm sorry I didn't speak up more. The department had this hush order, and we were told to keep quiet." I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. My shoulders felt tense, but I tried to keep my voice steady. I don't blame you, Nick. Everybody was just protecting themselves. I let out a slow breath. Harper's the one who never mind. Water under the bridge, right? Nick gave a small nod. Yeah, well, I hope so, because I'd hate to see your talent go to waste. You were one of the best detectives we had. That was never in doubt. I didn't respond, but part of me softened at his words. Whatever else had happened, Nick at least remembered my skills, not just the scandal. We sat down in the living room, juggling our mugs of black coffee. Amid the boxes labeled old case files and photos, Nick laid out a proposition. There were certain cases, small-time leads, background checks, even discreet intel that the official PD couldn't always handle. Press attention or red tape might tie their hands. Nick was willing to throw some of these scraps my way off the record if I was interested. You mean basically subcontracting for the cops? I said with a half-smile, sipping the coffee that tasted of burnt beans. He shrugged. Yeah, in a sense. If it keeps criminals off the street or helps us close smaller loops, maybe the brass will look the other way. I considered it, my mind drifting to the swirl of smaller private gigs I'd taken on. None had the thrill or the seriousness of official detective work. Why me? I asked. Aren't there other PIs out there with fewer complications? Nick smirked. Sure, but none I trust like you. Also, no one is as stubbornly thorough as you. Look, I know what happened with Harper, but that doesn't cancel out years of exemplary service. Maybe we can help each other. For a moment, the tension in my chest eased. This was the closest thing to a real second chance that I'd been offered since everything went sideways. I appreciate it, I said quietly. I'm not sure how it'll work in practice, but I'm open to it. He nodded, as if a small weight had lifted off his shoulders. Thanks, man. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry about Fiona. That must have been... He trailed off, face tightening. Everyone in the department knew the gist of my personal meltdown. I clenched my jaw, forcing a tight smile. It is what it is, I said, ending that topic with a finality that Nick respected. After Nick left, I lingered in the living room, letting the quiet sink in. The idea of indirectly working with the PD again stirred up complicated emotions. On the one hand, it felt validating they still needed me, in some capacity. On the other, it was a reminder that I'd never truly sever the ties to that life, no matter how much I claimed to want a fresh start. That same evening, I decided to make the leap from half-hearted private gigs to something more formal. I hopped online and started browsing for small office rentals. The city had a few older buildings with vacant suites, some more rundown than others. Part of me thought I should keep it minimal work out of my apartment, but I realized I needed a separate space to maintain my sanity, to draw a line between my personal bitterness and my professional self. An old building on Maple Street caught my eye. Second-floor unit, decent rent, a single window overlooking a narrow alley. Nothing grand, but it had potential. I jotted down the contact info. Then I froze, noticing the time, 9 p.m. The landlord's office was closed, so I'd have to wait until morning. I found myself calling Emily Collins again, letting her know I was thinking about opening a real office. She sounded genuinely excited. "Marcus, that's huge," she said, voice lighting up over the phone. "You're taking control." "It's just an office," I said, trying not to let a smile creep into my tone. "Yeah, but it's a statement, right? You're not letting them bury you." I mulled over her words. She was right. It was a statement, a declaration that I was no longer waiting for an apology or restitution from the precinct. I was forging my own path, even if it was built on the ashes of betrayal. "I guess so," I said, my voice quieter. "You guess so," she teased, laughing softly. "Go sign that lease. And hey, if you want free publicity, you know where to find me." We ended the call, and I felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. Later, I unrolled an old corkboard from my detective days and pinned it to a wall. For years, I used boards like that to map out cases' names, timelines, photos, red string connecting the dots. Now it hung empty, waiting for me to fill it. I stepped back to admire it, arms folded. "This is the future," I muttered, half sarcastic, half determined. Even though my personal life was in shambles and the ghosts of Fiona and Harper still haunted me, I could sense a subtle shift. I was re-entering a game I'd been forced out of, only this time I played by my own rules. The next morning I woke up early. I felt a jolt of energy, maybe nerves, as I drove to meet the landlord on Maple Street. The building had a cracked sign out front reading Maple Professional Suites, flanked by a few potholed parking spots. It was old, yes, but it had character. The landlord, Mr. Hewitt, was a balding man in a worn sweater who seemed eager to get a tenant. We walked up a flight of narrow stairs to a small hallway with 3 doors. "Yours would be on the left," he said, jangling a set of keys. He opened the door to a room that smelled of fresh paint and dusty carpets. A single window faced the alley, letting in a slice of morning light. The space had a main area that could fit a desk, a corner for a couple of chairs, and a storage closet. Pretty bare bones, but workable. I tested the creaky floorboards with my foot. "How's the heating in winter?" I asked, glancing at the baseboard radiators. Hewitt shrugged. "It's functional. You might need a space heater on really cold days." I gave a nod, walking around, letting my fingertips brush the walls. In my mind's eye, I could see a nameplate on the door. Pierce Investigations, a battered old desk in the middle, maybe a chair or two for clients. It wasn't the precinct, but it was mine. "I'll take it," I said, surprising even myself with the quick decision. That afternoon, I signed the lease. No fanfare, no special ceremony, just a handshake and a deposit. But as soon as I had the key in hand, a sense of resolution washed over me. I was no longer Detective Marcus Pierce of the St. Clair Police Department. I was Marcus Pierce, private investigator. If the department wouldn't let me do my job, I'd do it anyway, on my own terms. I spent the rest of the day hauling a spare desk, a file cabinet, and some basic office supplies into that second-floor suite. Sweating and grunting, I carried boxes up those steep stairs, cursing under my breath at each trip. But with every step, it felt like I was shedding the last remnants of self-pity. By early evening, I stood in the center of that room, hands on my hips, surveying the mismatch of furniture. Sure, the desk wobbled and the lamp flickered, but I felt oddly proud. This was a new beginning, born from the ashes of betrayal, fueled by the raw determination to prove I wasn't done. I ran a hand over the desk's chipped surface and sat down in the swivel chair, letting the seat squeak beneath my weight. A slow grin spread across my face. Re-entering the game indeed, because sometimes stepping back into the ring is the only way to remind the world and yourself that you're still standing. And deep down, I knew I had unfinished business. Maybe not directly with Harper or Fiona, but with the notion that betrayal could knock me down for good. I'd been a detective once. Now I was something else, someone who refused to be a victim of other people's lies. And I was ready, come what may, to prove it. I was nursing a second cup of coffee alone in my small second-floor office when the door opened without so much as a knock. Normally, I'd have scolded anyone for that, but the man who stepped inside moved with an air of entitlement that practically dared me to object. He wore a tailored navy suit and a light gray tie, the sort of outfit that screamed, "I'm important and you know it." "Marcus Pierce," he said, pausing to survey my office like it was a rundown motel. He pronounced my name carefully, as though checking if I was worth his time. I straightened in my creaky swivel chair, pushing aside the file I'd been reviewing. "That's me, and you are." He smoothed a hand over his neatly styled dark hair. "Andrew Blackwood. I hope I'm not catching you off guard, but my schedule didn't allow for an appointment." His mouth hinted at a grin, but it didn't reach his eyes. I gestured at the rickety wooden chair across from my desk. "Have a seat, Mr. Blackwood. I've got a couple minutes." Andrew stepped forward and sat down without comment. He cast another glance around the place. Battered filing cabinets, a stack of newspapers on a table by the window, a half-empty coffee mug on a side table. Everything about my office probably contrasted with the world he lived in. I briefly wondered how he'd even heard of me, but he looked like someone who had connections everywhere. He exhaled sharply. "I need a private investigator. Someone discreet, effective, and—" He paused, eyes flickering over my face. Not afraid to get his hands dirty if necessary. The last phrase prickled my instincts. "If you're looking for muscle or intimidation, that's not what I do," I said, keeping my tone measured. "I gather facts, that's it." Andrew chuckled, an oddly humorless sound. Of course. I simply meant I need someone who doesn't balk at delicate situations. I tapped my pen against the edge of my desk. What kind of situation are we talking about, Mr. Blackwood? A brief hesitation. My wife is being unfaithful, he said, looking me straight in the eye. Cassandra is her name. I want proof. Evidence that holds up in court. The words "in court" stood out. Most people who suspect a cheating spouse just want personal confirmation or leverage for a private confrontation. This sounded more calculated. I raised an eyebrow. You planning a divorce? His lips tightened. That depends on what you find. For a second, I glanced at a small photo pinned to my corkboard, a reminder of simpler cases I'd done. Domestic stuff is always messy, and it wasn't exactly my favorite type of assignment given my history, but rent still had to be paid. All right, I said slowly. Why come to me specifically? Andrew folded his hands on his knee, posture calm. I asked around. Detective Nick Barnes mentioned your name, said you were thorough, and some of my associates have heard about a few private matters you handled quietly. I need someone who won't run to the tabloids. Nick Barnes. Interesting. So you trust me? I trust your reputation, he said, his expression cool. I suppressed a sigh, uncertain if I liked the notion of Nick sending me these higher-level clients. Still, money was money, and a job was a job. Tell me about Cassandra and the man she's allegedly seeing. Andrew shifted in the seat, posture rigid. His name is Gabriel Myers. He's a philanthropic sort, runs charity events, invests in small businesses. They've been spending time together under the guise of community work. He practically spat that last phrase. I suspect it goes deeper. I want you to follow her, take pictures, gather anything that suggests a real affair. She has to be slipping up somewhere. His voice was controlled but carried an edge of anger that set me on alert. All right, I said. What about fees? He named a figure that made me sit a little straighter. It was more than generous. If he was throwing that kind of money around, he was either extremely wealthy or extremely desperate or both. Half up front, half when I deliver the results, I proposed. He flicked open a sleek leather briefcase, extracted a check, and filled it in with quick, confident strokes. When he tore it off and slid it across the desk, I tried not to let my eyebrows rise. People talk about hush money or settlement money. This check was in that ballpark, ready to solve a problem with a flick of the wrist. Discretion is paramount, Andrew said, standing. I noticed he was fairly tall, maybe 6'2", though slender. He straightened his tie again in a practiced motion. I don't want rumors. I want facts. Understand? I nodded, slipping the check into a drawer. I'll keep in touch as soon as I have anything. Without further chit-chat, he left, shutting the door behind him with a decisive click. In his wake, the office felt strangely smaller, as if his ego had taken all the oxygen. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling. The parallels to my own history, infidelity, suspicion, betrayal weren't lost on me. Part of me hated taking on a spouse cheating case. Another part recognized that the compensation Andrew offered could keep my office afloat for months. I reached for my phone. I debated calling Emily Collins, someone whose perspective I'd grown to value, or maybe Nick Barnes to confirm how exactly he recommended me. But something in Andrew's demeanor told me this case might get complicated, and I needed to approach it carefully. A soft beep from my phone interrupted my thoughts. A text from Emily popped up. She was just checking in some friendly remark about meeting for lunch next week. I tapped a quick reply saying I'd let her know soon. Then I realized I'd be too busy tailing Cassandra to have a normal social life for a while. Standing, I paced to the single narrow window in my office. From here, I could see the brick wall of the neighboring building and a sliver of sky above. I mulled over Andrew's face, his stiff body language, the faint tremor of anger when he talked about Gabriel Myers. He reminded me a little too much of Captain Harper, men who believed power could shield them from consequences. I shook off the uneasy feeling. This was just a job. I made a mental note to set up a structured surveillance schedule and to gather some basic background on Cassandra and Gabriel before diving in. No sense stumbling around in the dark. After a moment of rummaging, I grabbed my jacket and locked up the office. If I was going to get the lay of the land, I'd better start now. That was how my next major case began, a wealthy stranger handing me a fat check and asking for proof that his wife was cheating. On the surface, it was typical private investigator fare. Deep down, though, I sensed something darker lurking under Andrew Blackwood's polished exterior, like the kind of suppressed fury that can lead people to do reckless things. I just didn't realize how far it would go or how deeply it would echo the betrayal I'd once tasted in my own life. 2 days later, I was parked in a quiet residential neighborhood, watching a large suburban house with an immaculate lawn and high hedges. According to the file Andrew provided, this was the Blackwood residence. Cassandra Blackwood, mid-30s, apparently led a comfortable if not lavish life. Personal driver, occasional charity appearances, the standard high society routine. I'd spent part of the morning memorizing her face from a few photos Andrew had passed along. She had striking features, light brown hair styled to frame high cheekbones, soft eyes. In every photo, she either wore a controlled smile or looked slightly weary, as if the expectations of her station weighed on her more than she cared to admit. My vantage point was behind the tinted windows of my aging sedan. I kept the camera ready on the passenger seat, lens angled so I could pick it up and snap photos if necessary. There's a mundane side to PI work. Hours of waiting, scanning the driveway, checking notes, sipping coffee that's gone lukewarm. Eventually, the front door opened and Cassandra stepped out. She wore a long, tailored coat and carried a slim briefcase. A second later, a sleek black Tesla pulled around. The driver hopped out, opened the door for her. With minimal fuss, she got inside. I started my engine just as the Tesla eased onto the street, careful to maintain a discreet following distance. I'd done enough tail jobs to know the drill. Don't stick too close, don't hang too far back, watch for abrupt turns. We threaded through the city, passing upscale boutiques, until we reached a cafe known for hosting charity brunches. Cassandra went inside alone, the driver parking around the corner. I decided to give her a minute before I followed. Through the cafe's large windows, I spotted a tall man in a tailored jacket stand to greet her. Based on Andrew's intel, that had to be Gabriel Myers. They exchanged a polite hug, definitely on the friendlier side, but not blatant romance. Then they sat at a table near the back. Time to blend in, I told myself. I parked, grabbed a slim notebook, a phone, and stepped inside. The coffee aroma surrounded me, and a soft jazz tune played overhead. I slid into a table kitty corner from theirs, partially obscured by a decorative plant. I ordered a latte I didn't actually want, mostly to keep the staff from giving me suspicious looks. From that vantage point, I could see them well enough. Cassandra and Gabriel spoke in low tones, occasionally smiling. Their body language looked close, but not overtly intimate. She leaned forward, nodding intently as though confiding in him. He patted her hand once, in what appeared to be a gesture of reassurance. My camera phone was in my lap, angled discreetly. I snapped a few shots, trying not to draw attention. As I sipped the latte, my mind drifted to comparisons I wished I could ignore. The memory of my ex-wife, Fiona, meeting with Captain Harper behind my back, pricked at the corners of my consciousness. It was the same type of scenario I was capturing here. Two people leaning in, sharing something that might be innocent or might be illicit. My stomach twisted. Still, a job is a job, and I forced myself to stay focused. After about an hour, Cassandra and Gabriel stood. He offered to pay the bill, apparently a gentleman, but Cassandra insisted on splitting it. She seemed earnest, even grateful. Before they left, he gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder. If Andrew was hoping for a scandalous kiss or a public display, it wasn't happening here. I waited a moment, then followed them out. Gabriel walked her to the waiting Tesla, and she departed alone, giving him a small wave through the window. He headed off in the opposite direction, strolling at a casual pace. His demeanor was calm, not the least bit guilty or anxious from what I could tell. I snapped a few more pictures as the Tesla pulled away. Then I slid back into my car, making notes on the time, location, and interactions. So far, no damning evidence. Just two people having coffee, exchanging mild touches. Could be an affair, could be a close friendship, hard to say. I spent the next few days trailing Cassandra. She frequented a few charitable events, occasionally accompanied by Gabriel, sometimes not. I'd see them share subdued smiles, exchange documents about some fundraiser or business project. They met for lunch twice, once in a midtown bistro and another time at an art gallery event. The pattern was always respectful, a little warm, but not glaringly suspicious. On the tail end of the week, I found myself in a stakeout scenario that had me dozing off in my sedan's driver's seat. Just as I fought back a yawn, my phone vibrated. An incoming call from Emily Collins. I hesitated, glancing toward Cassandra's house lights off, no movement. I could risk a quick chat. "Hey," I answered quietly. "What's up?" Her voice was bright, though I caught the edge of curiosity. "Not much. You've been off the grid. Thought maybe you needed a break from your new big shot case." I chuckled softly, my breath fogging up the windshield. Big shot might be overselling it, but yeah, I've been on a pretty constant watch the last few days. She hesitated, then asked, "So, is it interesting?" I gazed at the dark house. It's more routine than dramatic, honestly. A lot of driving around, watching for signs of something that might not even exist. I realized I sounded bleak. But the client's paying well. A pause. Sometimes the best-paying clients are also the ones who cause the biggest headaches. "Truer words," I murmured. I glanced at the front door. Still quiet. Let's say I'm cautious. The guy who hired me, Andrew Blackwood, has a vibe. Hard to explain, but I'm not fully comfortable with it. Her voice softened. "Marcus, if anything feels off, be careful. These wealthy types can have complicated agendas." Her concern felt genuine. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. "I promise." We talked for another minute, mostly idle stuff about a new restaurant that opened downtown. Then I hung up, returning my attention to Cassandra's house. I noticed a single upstairs light turn on, then flick off after a couple minutes. A silhouette passed by the window. Perhaps she was preparing for bed, or maybe calling Gabriel. I snapped one final photo, more out of habit than evidence. Nothing in these days of surveillance suggested anything blatantly adulterous, no sneaking around after midnight, no secret hotel rendezvous. It was more like a close friendship or a professional partnership. Still, the tension in Andrew's voice when he hired me clung to my memory. He sounded so convinced. As I pulled away from the curb that night, I mulled over the possibility that Andrew might be mistaken. Maybe Cassandra wasn't cheating. Then again, maybe Andrew was pushing me to find proof for reasons that had little to do with love or heartbreak. I tried not to jump to conclusions. The truth would reveal itself eventually if I was patient enough to watch for it. By the following week, I'd built a neat timeline of Cassandra's daily routines on my office corkboard. Each pinned note represented a date, time, and location. It read like an elaborate spreadsheet of charity lunches, gym sessions, dinners at respectable restaurants, and sporadic appearances by Gabriel Myers. If you didn't look too closely, you'd think Cassandra lived a typical upper-class life, jam-packed with philanthropic obligations. On a gray Tuesday morning, the phone on my desk rang. I half expected it to be a tip from Nick Barnes or maybe Emily checking in, but the clipped voice belonged to Andrew Blackwood. "Pierce," he said without greeting, "we need to talk." I glanced at my watch, barely 9 a.m. "All right. What's on your mind, Mr. Blackwood?" Silence on the line for a moment. "Meet me at the Addison Hotel Lounge in an hour. I want an update." Before I could confirm, the line went dead. I muttered a curse under my breath. Andrew wasn't exactly big on manners. Grabbing my jacket and the partial file I'd compiled, I left the office. The Addison Hotel was about a 15-minute drive, so I had enough time to park and gather my thoughts. The hotel lounge was posh, marble floors, plush chairs, polished glass tables. The sort of place where a single cocktail cost more than a decent lunch. Andrew was seated in a corner booth, swirling a cup of coffee. He didn't stand as I approached, just angled his head in acknowledgement. "Mr. Pierce," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "I won't waste your time. What have you found?" I handed him a few printed photos. Cassandra and Gabriel at the cafe, at an art gallery, mid-conversation in a parking lot. Nothing damning, but enough to confirm they'd been meeting frequently. Andrew flipped through them, his jaw tightening. "Where are the more incriminating shots?" he asked, voice low. I set my shoulders. "I don't have any. They're not sneaking off to hotels or hooking up in the backseat of a car. From what I can see, they're either coordinating charity work or personal business. If there's an affair, it's discreet." Andrew's lips thinned. He dropped the photos on the table. "I hired you to prove this is more than business. I'm certain there's a deeper relationship. Keep looking. The tension in his tone reminded me of someone who wasn't just suspicious, but desperate. I plan to, I said calmly. But so far nothing suggests physical involvement. I'm telling you the truth. He pursed his lips. Gabriel is a manipulator. He wants more from Cassandra. She might be too naive to see it. He paused, leaning in. Or maybe she's complicit. Either way, keep digging. I studied Andrew's expression. He looked composed, but his eyes burned with an undercurrent of anger or maybe fear. The contrast between his polished attire and the raw bitterness in his voice put me on edge. I'll continue surveillance, I assured him, but this might take time. He let out a frustrated breath. Fine, but I want daily updates, and if you find evidence that can be used in a legal setting, I want it immediately. It was my turn to bristle. I don't usually do daily check-ins. You'll hear from me when there's actual progress. Andrew's face hardened. You'll do them for me. He leaned back, crossing his arms. Unless you want to forfeit the rest of your payment. We locked eyes for a tense moment. Part of me wanted to argue that no client dictates how I run my investigation, but I also remembered the hefty sum he was paying and how that money could keep my new business alive. Fine, I said, voice clipped. I'll send short updates. He nodded, satisfied. I assume we're done here. He waved a hand dismissively, reaching for his coffee cup. I stood, collecting the photos. Yeah, I'll be in touch. Then I turned and walked out of that marble lounge, feeling a mixture of frustration and resolve. Andrew Blackwood might have been used to controlling everyone around him, but I wasn't on his payroll to be a puppet. If he wanted the truth, that's what I'd give him no matter how it turned out. Back in my car, I slumped against the seat, exhaling a long breath. What if there really was no affair? What if Cassandra just enjoyed Gabriel's company, and Andrew's paranoia was fueling a false narrative? I'd seen it happen before, jealousy warping reality. Still, I took Andrew's warning seriously. He seemed determined to find wrongdoing even if it wasn't there. That might mean he'd pressure me to interpret innocent moments as incriminating. Or worse, he might decide to take matters into his own hands if I couldn't deliver. I shook off that grim thought and headed back to the office. Later that day, I called Nick Barnes. He picked up on the second ring, voice gruff. Pierce, what's going on? I need some background on Andrew Blackwood, I said. Anything that's public record, business holdings, lawsuits, that kind of thing. Nick chuckled. You're asking me to do your homework? Not exactly, but I'd like to confirm some details. He's hired me for a PI job and something feels off. Nick paused. Sure, I'll see what I can dig up from open records. Don't expect any hush-hush police documents, though. Don't want to put my badge on the line. Understood. Just see what's out there. I hesitated. Thanks, Nick. I appreciate it. No problem, man. Stay safe, he said, then hung up. I spent the next several hours revisiting my notes, cross-referencing times I'd seen Gabriel with Cassandra. The more I studied them, the more it looked like their interactions could be entirely above board. But I also knew well that appearances can be misleading. People hide secrets behind polished smiles all the time. Somewhere around 8 that evening, I locked up the office and stepped outside. The sky was purple-black, the street lamps casting a dim glow over the sidewalk. My stomach growled, reminding me I'd skipped lunch and dinner. Maybe a late bite at the diner down the block would help me think straight. On the short walk, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered warily. Hello? A quiet moment, then a low male voice whispered, If you know what's best, you'll let this case go. My heart hammered. Who is this? The line disconnected. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, mind reeling. A threat. Short, cryptic, but definitely a threat. Was it someone connected to Andrew? Or maybe someone close to Cassandra, protective of her privacy? I glanced around the darkened street, but only saw a couple of parked cars and distant headlights. My breath came out in a hiss. I'd been threatened before in past investigations, but it never got easier. Tucking the phone in my pocket, I continued to the diner. Inside, the neon lights made everything look stark. I slid into a booth, heart still pounding, and ordered a burger and fries. As the waitress left, I replayed that call. The words were few, but carried a clear message. Back off. Could Andrew have orchestrated that to keep me on edge? Seemed counterintuitive if he wanted me to keep digging. Or maybe Gabriel had a friend who wanted to protect him. My appetite vanished as soon as the food arrived, but I forced myself to eat anyway, couldn't afford to lose clarity. Then I scribbled some notes on a napkin. Threat call, unknown male voice, disconnect. The basic facts of a phone call that might shift how I approach this case. One thing was certain. I was venturing into a deeper mess than just a spouse suspecting an affair. The turning gears beneath Andrew's veneer of wealth were ominous, and I was pinned right between him and whoever opposed him. My only choice was to keep investigating, keep my head down, and watch my back. Because if someone was trying to scare me off, there had to be a reason they feared what I might uncover. My office phone buzzed early the next morning, and I picked up groggily, my head still foggy from the strange threat call the night before. "Pierce Investigations," I mumbled. A friendly grunt sounded on the other end. "Marcus, it's Nick. I poked around on Andrew Blackwood like you asked." I sat up straighter, grabbing a pen. "What did you find?" "Plenty of public records. He's the CEO of a private investment firm involved in real estate, tech startups, but nothing major stands out, no big lawsuits or criminal charges. However," Nick paused as if weighing his words, "I found something else. He's in the midst of renegotiating a substantial prenup with his wife. I guess that's no secret, but it might be relevant." My stomach tightened. A prenup renegotiation? That could explain why he's so eager to prove Cassandra's infidelity, I said. If she's found at fault, maybe it nullifies certain clauses. Nick's tone was grim. "Exactly. A cheating clause in a prenup can be expensive or save someone a fortune." I jotted down a note. "Prenup angle, big money at stake?" "Thanks, Nick. This helps." He sighed. "Just be careful, Marcus. If Andrew's messing with big money, he'll protect his interests any way he can." After we hung up, I stared at the phone for a while. The more I learned, the more Andrew's behavior made sense. This wasn't just a jealous husband scenario. He had a financial motive to prove Cassandra was in the wrong. That might make him a man willing to push the limits, and maybe that's why someone warned me off. A tap sounded at my half-open office door. I glanced up to see Emily Collins, her eyes bright despite the early hour. She held 2 paper cups. "Figured you could use coffee," she said, stepping inside. I motioned for her to come in, taking the cup she offered. "You're a lifesaver," I said, inhaling the rich aroma. She perched on the edge of the spare chair. "So you look stressed. Tell me you've been sleeping." I almost laughed. "Not really. This case I'm on is getting complicated." I hesitated before mentioning the phone threat. But Emily was one of the few people I trusted. So I told her softly, "Last night I got a call from someone telling me to back off." Her eyes widened. "Wait, are you serious? Did you recognize the voice?" "No, and I can't say for sure who's behind it." I folded my hands, the coffee cup growing warm between them. "But it's definitely linked to Andrew or Cassandra," Emily frowned. "That's not good. Maybe you should talk to the police." A dry laugh escaped me. "Report what exactly? An unknown voice telling me to drop a case? I doubt that'll get much traction. Besides, I'll keep an eye out. Nick can't do much unless there's a direct threat or evidence of a crime." She shifted, looking torn. "Marcus, you've been through enough. If this is too dangerous..." I shook my head. "I can't walk away. Not yet. Andrew's paying me a lot, and I want to see the truth of this. Something about it. It feels bigger than just a cheating spouse." Her gaze flicked to the corkboard behind me, with its pinned schedule of Cassandra's activities and scribbled notes. "Just promise me you'll be careful. Some of these wealthy types think they can buy outcomes, and if that fails, they get ruthless." I gave her a small, reassuring nod. "I promise." She left soon after, the worry still evident on her face. It struck me again that Emily was a stark contrast to the betrayal I'd endured with Fiona. She genuinely cared, and that was a feeling I wasn't used to accepting easily. Letting out a breath, I turned back to my files. By late afternoon, I felt compelled to tell Andrew about the phone threat purely to gauge his reaction. Maybe he'd slip and reveal something. So I typed a short email. "Received an anonymous call discouraging me from continuing your case. Any idea who might want me to back off?" An hour later, his reply popped up. "No clue. Focus on results. not rumors. A.B. short, dismissive. It didn't answer my question, but it spoke volumes. Andrew either didn't care or was pretending not to care. Both possibilities made me uneasy. That evening, I decided to do a deeper background check on Gabriel Myers. If Cassandra truly wasn't cheating, maybe he had ulterior motives. Using some public databases, I found references to charitable foundations where Gabriel served on the board. All legit. He had no known criminal record, no bankruptcies, just a squeaky clean resume. Still, I had a hunch. People with clean resumes can hide the ugliest secrets. Maybe he'd pulled some strings, or maybe Andrew just believed so. A storm was brewing beneath the surface. I felt it in the subtle threats, the hush around that prenup renegotiation, and Andrew's mounting impatience. 2 days later, Nick called again. "Marcus, you might find this interesting. Andrew's father was a prominent businessman who left him controlling shares in a couple of companies. There's a rumor Andrew's expansions haven't all been ethical. Bribery, intimidation whispers, but nothing proven. Could mean he's used to getting his way." I tapped a pen against my desk. "That lines up with what I've seen so far," I mused. "He's definitely used to having power." Nick snorted. "Yeah, well, watch your back. A man like that doesn't play nice when the stakes are high." After I ended the call, I flicked my gaze to the stack of photos showing Cassandra and Gabriel over the past weeks. They looked almost innocent. If Andrew wanted a damning story, he didn't have it yet. That might make him desperate. Around 8 p.m., I packed up my notes, feeling the ache in my shoulders. Another day of chasing leads. On my way out of the building, I spotted Detective Barnes in the parking lot. He must have just finished some errand in the area. He waved me over. "Got a minute?" he asked. His expression was earnest, brow creased. "Sure," I said, glancing around. The overhead security light buzzed. "Emily told me you got threatened," Nick said in a low voice. "I can't officially intervene unless it escalates, but I've asked around. No one's heard rumors in the department of anything specifically targeting you. So if it's someone connected to Andrew, they're keeping quiet." I nodded, frustration knotting in my gut. "That's about what I figured." Nick pressed his lips together. "I can do random drive-bys near your office if that helps. But you know how it is. We can't dedicate manpower to a possible scare tactic without evidence. Just stay vigilant." "Thanks," I murmured. "I appreciate it." He gave my shoulder a reassuring pat, then headed off. As I watched him go, a swirl of conflicting emotions churned in my chest. Part of me wanted to call it quits on this case, toss Andrew's money back at him, and walk away. But that'd mean letting someone intimidate me. And after the fiasco with Captain Harper, I vowed never to let another powerful figure steamroll my life. The night was quiet as I drove home. My mind revisited the puzzle. Andrew's determination, Cassandra's seemingly mild behavior, Gabriel's role, and the unknown party who wanted me to stop digging. They were all pieces that needed to fit together. I couldn't yet see the final image, but I sensed it would be something messy and potentially dangerous. As I unlocked the door to my apartment, I paused. The hush of the hallway reminded me how alone I was in this. Emily cared but was on the outside. Nick had constraints. Andrew was playing puppet master, or so he thought. Sighing, I stepped inside. In the dim light, my reflection in the hallway mirror caught my eye. I looked tired, older than my real age. A wave of bitterness surged, recalling how I'd ended up here betrayal by Fiona, forced out of the police force, now dealing with suspiciously wealthy clients who might be as bad as my old enemies. Setting my keys on the small table, I made a silent vow. I'd uncover the truth about Cassandra and Gabriel, whether it led to evidence of an affair or something else. And if Andrew turned out to be manipulating me, well, I'd handle that too, because I was done letting manipulative people hijack my life for their own ends. A final text buzzed as I was about to turn in for the night. Unknown number again. My chest tightened. I braced myself, opening it. "You're persistent. This isn't over. No name, no explanation. Just a vague message of warning, or maybe challenge." I stared at the screen in the faint glow from the hallway lamp. My anger flared, but I forced myself to breathe. These ties that bound me to Andrew's case were growing tighter. The question was, who exactly was holding the other end of the rope? The day Gabriel Myers died started like any other me sipping black coffee in my cramped second-floor office, scanning the morning headlines while waiting for my next move. The phone buzzed mid-scroll. I expected Andrew Blackwood demanding more updates or perhaps Cassandra's schedule changing, but instead, it was Nick Barnes, his voice tight. "Marcus," he said, not bothering with a greeting. "We've got a situation." I felt my pulse quicken. Nick rarely led with that tone. "What is it?" "Gabriel Myers. They just found him dead." My grip on the phone slackened. "Dead? How?" Nick sighed. "They're calling it a boating accident. The official line is that he might have miscalculated the fuel mixture or a leak. The boat exploded on the water early this morning. He didn't make it." A wave of disbelief washed over me. I had spent the past few weeks tailing Gabriel and Cassandra. Nothing about him struck me as careless. He didn't strike me as a man who'd blow himself up by mixing fuel the wrong way. My mind whirled, locking onto the possibility of foul play. "Jesus," I muttered. "You sure it's not suspicious?" "The scene's messy," Nick said. "But you know me, I think everything's suspicious until proven otherwise. The department's investigating, but it's not a top priority. They're leaning on the unfortunate accident narrative." "And Andrew?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Nick paused. "He's not under suspicion. Yet. Why do you think he's involved?" I stared out the window, watching pigeons fight over crumbs on the pavement below. He had motive if Gabriel really was close to Cassandra. But this is so extreme, I trailed off, my gut telling me something was very wrong. "Let me know if you get more details." When I hung up, my thoughts moved like quicksand, each possibility pulling me deeper. If Andrew arranged for Gabriel's death, it meant the man I was working for had just stepped into a realm far darker than simple jealousy. Alternatively, maybe it really was just a freak accident. But the timing was too convenient. The problem was now conveniently gone. I decided to see if Cassandra knew. My heart sank as I dialed the number I'd discreetly obtained from a local charity roster. It rang 3 times before a soft, trembling voice answered. "Hello?" "Cassandra, it's Marcus Pierce," I said, choosing my words carefully. I swallowed hard. "I heard about Gabriel. I'm so sorry." There was a ragged exhale. "Oh God, I can't believe this is happening. They're saying it was an accident, but it feels impossible." She sounded on the edge of tears. "I know. If there's anything I can do—" I paused, feeling the helplessness in my own voice. "I just wanted to let you know I'm here if you need help." She murmured a thank you, her voice thick with grief. "I'm not sure what to think. Gabriel was careful with everything. He wasn't reckless." There was a pause, then a shuddering breath. "Andrew keeps telling me it's a tragedy we should mourn quietly, but something feels off. Gabriel said a few days ago he was close to revealing something important about Andrew's deals." "Then this happens?" My pulse jumped. "Revealing something? Did he give specifics?" She sniffled. "He just said Andrew had skeletons in his closet, dangerous ones. Gabriel wanted to confront him or threaten to expose him if he didn't back off me. Now he's gone, and Andrew's telling me to drop the matter." A subtle quake in her tone, fear or maybe anger she was trying to hold back. My instincts as a PI roared to life. "Cassandra, don't do anything rash. Let me look into it. There might be more to Gabriel's death than they're saying." She exhaled shakily. "Please, anything you can do. I'm terrified." After we ended the call, I stared at the phone in my hand, adrenaline simmering. If Gabriel truly had dirt on Andrew, that might have made him a target. And now, conveniently, he was out of the picture. Andrew had publicly feigned shock and grief, no doubt. But the quiet satisfaction I'd sometimes glimpsed on his face wouldn't be surprising now. I forced myself to take a breath, then dialed Andrew's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice subdued but oddly measured. "Pierce, I'm assuming you heard." "Yeah," I said. "Gabriel's gone." "Yes, it's tragic," he replied, not sounding particularly mournful. "I'd hate for Cassandra to suffer anymore. This might be a reason to halt your investigation, wouldn't you say? There's no affair to uncover now." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I guess you could call it case closed." A chill clutched at my spine. Case closed. "You hired me to find proof," I reminded him. "We never got any. So yes, there's no further angle on the alleged affair. But He cut me off. That's all I needed. Then he cleared his throat, layering on a mocking note of sympathy. I'll send you the remaining balance for your time. Let's consider our business concluded. The line clicked dead before I could respond. I lowered the phone, anger coiling in my gut. Andrew was all but announcing that he was done with me and with Gabriel. Was I just a pawn in his twisted game? If so, the game had turned lethal. While a rational part of me said to step back, pocket the money, and walk away, the rest of me seethed with the memory of betrayal. I recognized the same callous arrogance that Harper once displayed, believing he could ruin someone's life without consequences. I'd let Harper walk away with minimal repercussions back then. This time felt different. This time I sensed that two people, Gabriel and potentially Cassandra, were caught in a lethal snare. I called Nick again, demanding details of the crime scene. He couldn't say much, but he promised to keep me in the loop. Meanwhile, I rummaged through my notes, looking for any mention of Gabriel's boat or suspicious references to Andrew's business ties. The puzzle pieces were scattered, but I felt sure they'd form a picture of premeditated sabotage if I could just slot them together. By late afternoon, my appetite was gone. I paced my office, phone in hand, debating whether to call Emily. Part of me didn't want to drag her further into this. Another part needed to hear her steady voice. In the end, I sent her a text. Gabriel Myers dead. Something's up with Andrew. Be careful. She replied almost instantly. Oh my God. I'm here if you need me. Please watch your back. The day ended with a quiet hush, the city's neon glow flickering through my window. I sat at my desk in the dim light, thinking about how fleeting life could be. Gabriel had seemed so vibrant just a week ago, championing charities, meeting Cassandra for coffees. Now he was gone, lost to a suspicious explosion. I couldn't shake the gnawing certainty that Andrew was involved, even if I had no solid proof yet. I promised myself that night I wouldn't let this slide. If Andrew orchestrated Gabriel's death, he had to be held accountable. But first, I needed Cassandra's trust, Nick's help, and a concrete lead. Until then, I'd do what I did best. Dig deeper, step by careful step. Because in my experience, men like Andrew Blackwood always leave a paper trail, one that can eventually be used to turn the tables, even when they think they've already won. Gabriel Myers' death shook Cassandra to the core. The next time I saw her, she was standing under the canopy of a dimly lit parking garage, arms wrapped tight around herself, face pale. She'd called me, voice trembling, asking to meet in private. I suggested this quiet location away from prying eyes. She looked up as I approached, her eyes redrimmed. Marcus, thank you for coming. Her voice was barely above a whisper, carrying an undercurrent of sheer exhaustion. Of course, I said gently. I'm sorry about Gabriel. She gave a shaky nod. He was a good friend, you know. He didn't deserve this. Her words caught in her throat, and she stared at the concrete floor. I can't prove Andrew did anything, but I feel it. It's as if a piece of me is screaming that he's behind it. The sincerity in her eyes tightened my chest. I'd been suspicious, but Cassandra's conviction was something else. If Andrew's involved, we'll figure it out. I promise. She shook her head, pressing her lips together. That's not all. I was already thinking of leaving Andrew before all this. I've been miserable for months. Her voice faltered. He's controlling. He checks my phone, manages my finances. Gabriel told me I had to get out. Now he's gone, and Andrew's been even more watchful. The image of Andrew's piercing gaze flickered in my mind, combined with memories of Captain Harper's controlling nature. My stomach churned. Have you told Andrew you want out? A harsh laugh escaped her. Not in so many words. But he senses my withdrawal. He's threatened that if I try to divorce him without cause, the prenup is ironclad. I'd be left with nothing. She paused, voice trembling. If he can paint me as unfaithful, I lose everything. If I stay, I live under his thumb, and now Gabriel's gone, he was my only real ally. Her desperation was palpable. Look, I said, money aside, you need to protect yourself. If you genuinely fear for your life, there are resources, restraining orders, safe houses. Cassandra's eyes flickered with fear. A restraining order against a man as powerful as Andrew? He'd bury me in court or worse. She exhaled shakily. I'm just so scared. I feel like I'm drowning." I wanted to reach out and put a hand on her shoulder, but I kept my distance, aware she was balancing raw grief and terror. "We'll figure something out," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You're not alone in this. I've got some contacts. My friend Nick is a detective. I can talk to him off the record." She nodded, managing a grateful half-smile. "Please, I can't do this alone." I walked her to her car, scanning the shadows of the parking garage for anything suspicious. Nothing obvious. But dread crept over me. If Andrew truly orchestrated Gabriel's death, Cassandra might be next on his list. Her life was unraveling, and I couldn't ignore the parallels to what I'd once lost. After she drove away, I returned to my office, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. I found myself flipping through the old, battered notebook where I kept scribbled references to Andrew's calls, financial rumors, and anything that might tie him to a crime. I circled the note. Gabriel had proof? Possibly blackmail? Cassandra's life had become precarious because of that. The next day, I met with Nick Barnes at a quiet diner outside the city center, less chance of being recognized. Over a plate of greasy bacon and eggs, I explained what Cassandra confided. Nick listened, brow furrowed. "Andrew's a control freak with money," he said, swirling his coffee mug. "We both know these types don't take kindly to losing. If Gabriel threatened to expose him, that's a strong motive. But we still lack evidence of sabotage on that boat." I nodded grimly. "We need a lead. Cassandra thinks Andrew might have records or phone logs that prove he set this up." Nick pursed his lips. "We can't get a warrant without probable cause, and right now, the official story is accident. Unless we have a witness or tangible proof, my hands are tied." I leaned back, tension coiling in my neck. I can't just let Cassandra face this alone. If Andrew's behind one murder, he might do it again. Nick's voice softened. "I get it, but you have to be careful, Marcus. I know you're still haunted by what Harper did to you. Don't let that drive you to cross a line." Memories flickered of the day I found Fiona in bed with Harper, the fury that exploded in me, the violent confrontation that cost me my badge. "I won't lose control," I said, half to reassure myself, "but I can't watch Andrew get away with this." We parted ways with Nick promising to keep digging for any trace of suspicious boat repairs or financial transactions that might tie Andrew to sabotage. Meanwhile, I told Cassandra to keep me updated on her movements so I could watch her back. She told me Andrew was planning a business trip soon, which might give her room to breathe or put her at risk if he decided to act swiftly before leaving. 3 nights later, while staking out near Cassandra's neighborhood, I saw a figure lurking along the dark hedgerow by her driveway. My heart jolted, adrenaline spiking. I grabbed my camera, snapping a few grainy shots of a tall, broad-shouldered individual in a hoodie, face obscured by shadows. Before I could move closer, the figure slipped away, disappearing into the night. I waited an extra hour, scanning the street. No sign of the stranger. Cassandra's lights were off. She was likely asleep. The entire situation felt like a vice was tightening around her and me. If Andrew was sending men to watch her, it was a sign the conflict was escalating. My suspicion only solidified when Cassandra texted me the next morning. "Found footprints by the window. Andrew left for a short trip, but I'm scared. Did you see anything?" I withheld the full truth to avoid panicking her, just telling her I'd keep a closer eye. In the back of my mind, I dreaded that we were inching closer to the point where this marriage meltdown might erupt into full-blown violence. Gabriel's death was the first act. Cassandra's fate hung in the balance of the second. That evening, I heard from Emily. She called, worry woven into her every word. "Are you okay, Marcus? I've been reading about Gabriel's accident. Some tabloids are even calling it suspicious. Did you have any involvement?" I let out a tired breath. "I was investigating him on behalf of Andrew, but now it's turned into something bigger. I'm worried for Cassandra, and I'm worried Andrew's pulling strings behind the scenes." "You sound exhausted," she said softly. "I am," I admitted, "but I can't walk away. If Cassandra ends up like Gabriel, it'll be on me too." The words left a bitter taste in my mouth. I was taking on guilt that might not be mine, but it felt personal. Emily hesitated. "Just remember, You're not the only one who wants to protect people. Nick's there, and I'm here. Don't carry this alone. Her concern warmed me in a lonely moment. Thanks, Em, I murmured. I appreciate it. We hung up, and I tried to calm my racing thoughts. The lines were drawn. Cassandra was in real danger. Andrew was either behind or at least benefiting from Gabriel's death. And if Nick couldn't officially intervene yet, it fell to me to shield Cassandra from a similar fate. I found myself staring at an old photo on my desk, one I hadn't tossed out because it reminded me that even if life destroyed you once, you could still get back up. In the picture, I stood in uniform, a proud detective with a future. Now I was a private investigator, burdened by regrets. But one thing remained. I refused to let another powerful man's betrayal crush someone innocent. If that meant stepping outside the lines, so be it. I was sitting in my car on a drizzly Thursday night, eating stale fries from a drive-through bag, when the headlights in my rearview mirror caught my attention. A black SUV pulled up behind me, its engine rumbling. We were on a quiet street near Cassandra's house. I'd been parked there to keep watch. My gut tightened. Something about the SUV's slow approach felt off. I tossed the fries aside, slid a hand toward my glove compartment where I kept a crowbar. Not exactly standard, but I never carried a gun after losing my badge. The SUV idled behind me for a few seconds. Then the driver's door opened. Two men stepped out, silhouettes in the red glow of my brake lights. One was large, broad shoulders under a leather jacket. The other was wiry but moved with a predator's grace. Together they approached my window, ignoring the rain that spattered the pavement. I cracked the window an inch. "Help you, fellas?" My voice was calm, but my heart pounded. The big one sneered. "Marcus Pierce?" I didn't confirm or deny. I sized them up, noticing the subtle bulge at the wiry guy's waist. A firearm, likely. Trouble had found me. "Boss says you're poking your nose in things that don't concern you," said the wiry man. His voice carried a quiet menace. He's tired of it. My mind jumped to Andrew, or someone in his orbit. "I'm a private investigator. I have every right to work a case," I said evenly. The big one slammed a fist on my driver's side window, jolting me. "You want to back off now?" he growled. "Otherwise, we make your girlfriend pay. Emily, right?" A chill shot through me. They'd done their homework. My knuckles went white on the steering wheel. Emily? She wasn't even deeply involved in the case, just bystander support. Fury burned in my gut. I shoved the door open hard, catching the big guy in the chest. He stumbled back. The wiry man lunged forward, but I swung the crowbar from the footwell. He ducked, cursing, and yanked out a pistol. I froze. If he pulled that trigger, I'd be done. But the big guy barked, "No gunshots! Keep it quiet!" That hesitation gave me a split second to slam the crowbar into the wiry man's wrist. He let out a pained hiss, dropping the pistol, which clattered on the wet asphalt. I took advantage, ramming my shoulder into him. He staggered, cursing. The big one recovered from the door slam and aimed a punch at my side. Pain exploded in my ribs, nearly knocking the wind out of me. I twisted away, crowbar raised, but he grabbed my arm, wrestling for control. We stumbled, boots skidding on the slick pavement, locked in a brief, savage dance under the streetlight's murky glow. It wasn't elegant. Elbows, knees, and curses filled the air. My old police training kicked in. Keep your stance, control the weapon. I managed to bring the crowbar's end down on the big man's shoulder. He roared in pain, releasing me. I heard the wiry man scrambling for his pistol. Grunting, I kicked it further down the pavement. "Enough!" the big man hissed, clutching his shoulder, eyes narrowed. "We'll finish this another time." He signaled the wiry man to back off. They scrambled into the SUV, engine revving. As it sped away, I stood there panting, the crowbar in my hand, a pounding ache radiating from my ribs. Rain pelted my face, washing away the sweat. My chest heaved as I realized how close I'd come to a bullet. They threatened Emily. That turned my shaky adrenaline into cold resolve. This was no idle intimidation. They were prepared to kill me if needed, and they wouldn't hesitate to use Emily as leverage. I stumbled back to my car, fumbled for my phone, and dialed Emily's number. It rang twice before she picked up, sounding half asleep. "Marcus, everything okay?" "Emily," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Two guys just jumped me. They threatened you. I need you to get somewhere safe, maybe out of town for a bit." Her alarm was immediate. "Oh my God, are you hurt? Where are you?" I'm okay, mostly, I said, breathing shallowly against the pain in my ribs. But I'm serious. These men were professionals. They mentioned you by name. My voice cracked slightly. I can't risk you being caught in this crossfire. There was a moment of tense silence. Then Emily said softly, All right, I'll pack a bag tonight. My cousin has a place upstate. I'll drive there first thing in the morning. Relief warred with guilt. I'm sorry, I whispered. Don't be, she replied, her tone fierce. Just promise me you'll watch your back and call me every day. I will, I promised. We hung up and I slumped in the driver's seat, wincing at the bruises forming. Rain continued to blur the windshield, but I hardly noticed. My mind was spinning with the reality that Andrew's intimidation tactics had escalated from anonymous phone calls to physical violence. This was the final push I needed to see the bigger picture. If they were targeting me, they might be coming for Cassandra next. I had to finish this investigation before more blood was spilled. The next morning, I visited Nick's precinct, ignoring the stares from uniformed officers who remembered my ignominious exit. I found Nick by the coffee machine, sporting a perplexed frown. You look like you got run over, he said quietly, noticing the bruises on my jaw and the stiffness in my posture. Close enough, I muttered. I quickly recapped the ambush. Nick's expression darkened. That crosses a line, he said, voice low. Did you recognize them? I shook my head. No, they threatened Emily, probably hired muscle. I hesitated, glancing around. Nick, I know you're bound by the rules, but I need your help. We have to protect Cassandra and figure out how Andrew's orchestrating all of this. Nick cursed under his breath. I'll see if I can get plates on that SUV or if any street cams caught it, but I can't promise the captain will sign off on a full-scale operation without solid leads. I understand, I said. Just do what you can. I'll handle the rest. Nick eyed me warily. Don't go vigilante, Marcus. I forced a thin smile that didn't reach my eyes. I won't. But I'm not letting them threaten Emily or Cassandra. This ends soon, one way or another. Leaving the precinct, I realized my phone had rung 3 times Cassandra. I returned her call as I hobbled into my office building. She answered in a state of near panic. Someone followed me home last night. I swear it was the same figure from before, watching from the street. I locked all the doors, but I'm so scared. Stay calm, I said. Do you have a safe place you can go? Family or a hotel under a friend's name? She breathed shakily. Andrew's out of town for a couple of days, but I'm not sure if that makes me safer or more vulnerable. A pause. I'll go to a hotel. I need to gather some clothes. Good. I'll text you a hotel I trust no credit card trail linking you to Andrew. I paused, swallowing the anger that threatened to choke me. Hang in there, Cassandra. We're not giving up. Thank you, she whispered, sounding on the verge of tears. I don't know what I'd do without your help. After hanging up, I sank onto my office chair, pressing a hand to my rib cage. Pain pulsed under my fingertips. The broad-shouldered thug had done a number on me. But the ache in my side was nothing compared to the fury coiled in my chest. Andrew's men had made a critical error by targeting Emily. They'd turned a messy case into something deeply personal. They wanted me to back off. Too late. I'd never run from a fight where innocent people's lives were at stake. The next step was to gather every scrap of evidence we had, connect the dots, and corner Andrew. But how? With limited police help, I had to rely on Nick's off-the-record assistance, Cassandra's insider knowledge, and my own capacity for risk. The plan was taking shape in my mind. Lure Andrew into a position where he couldn't hide behind lawyers or intimidation. Expose him for Gabriel's death, or at least tie him to the attempt on my life. Wyatt Thorne's name popped into my head, some rumored enforcer connected to Andrew's shady deals. If I could link them, my phone dinged with a text from Emily. Leaving soon. I'll call you when I arrive. I took a shaky breath, forcing myself to calm down. I had to keep Emily safe and see Cassandra through this. I might be battered and bruised, but I wasn't beaten. Not yet. That evening, I locked myself in the office with a single desk lamp casting shadows on the walls. My bruised ribs protested each time I shifted in the chair, but the discomfort grounded me, reminding me I was still alive and that I had a mission. On the corkboard, I rearranged notes and pictures, searching for the missing puzzle piece that would pin Andrew to Gabriel's death and the threats on Cassandra. Flicking through my phone, I found old messages from Andrew. His tone had shifted drastically from the day we met. First, he was polite and professional, then pushy about proof of Cassandra's infidelity, then dismissive once Gabriel was gone. His callous final message, "case closed," echoed in my head, fueling a simmering rage. My mind slipped to Fiona for a moment. She'd once betrayed me with Harper, turning my life upside down. That betrayal had cost me my badge, my faith in the system, nearly my sanity. Now Andrew was another powerful man who believed he could manipulate outcomes, discard people like pawns, and walk away unscathed. Not this time, I vowed silently. The door creaked open behind me and I jumped, but it was only Nick, letting himself in quietly. "Door was unlocked," he said, setting a paper cup of coffee on my desk. "Figured you'd still be here." "Thanks," I muttered, taking the cup. "Any news?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Not much on the men who attacked you. No security footage turned up anything definitive. They must have known the blind spots. As for Andrew, I found a few references to a guy named Wyatt Thorne, alleged muscle for hire, who's rumored to handle dirty work for wealthy clients. But no official charges." I tapped a note on the board. Wyatt Thorne? I'd heard a rumor or two in the underworld about a Thorne who specialized in intimidation. "You think that's the lead?" Nick nodded grimly. "If Andrews hired him, we might be able to flip Thorne or catch him in the act. But we need a plan." A plan. The word settled in the room like a challenge. I rubbed the back of my sore neck. "Andrew's away for a day or two. That might be our window." Nick sipped his coffee. "If we can provoke Thorne into showing his hand, maybe by giving Andrew reason to suspect Cassandra's about to talk, he might send Thorne to eliminate the problem. We catch Thorne in the act. That would tie him and Andrew together." A flicker of uncertainty ran through me. We were proposing a sting operation, effectively. "You sure you can get the department to back that up?" Nick shook his head. "Probably not fully, but we can do it off the books. I can arrange some discreet backup. As soon as Thorne makes a move, we arrest him. Then we squeeze him to flip on Andrew." An image flashed of Cassandra, petrified, alone in a hotel room. Could I put her in harm's way to bait Andrew and Thorne? The very thought twisted my stomach, but we needed something concrete. "We'd have to keep Cassandra safe," I said, voice tight. "No more casualties?" Nick nodded. "We'll control the environment. Maybe set up a decoy location. Use phone calls that suggest Cassandra's ready to expose everything. If Thorne shows up, we pounce." My pulse thundered. The moral weight of it all pressed on me, endangering Cassandra intentionally, but I also saw no other path. Andrew's resources dwarfed ours, and waiting around meant we risked more attacks. I gave a reluctant nod. "All right, let's do it. But Cassandra has to be on board." She deserves a choice. The next day, I met Cassandra in a small cafe near her secret hotel. She wore a hooded coat, hair pinned back to avoid recognition. She looked exhausted. Over 2 untouched cups of tea, I explained Nick's idea, a controlled trap for Wyatt Thorne. Her hands shook. "You want me to act as bait?" "Only if you agree," I said gently. "We'd station officers nearby Nick's contacts. Thorne wouldn't get near you." Cassandra trembled. "Marcus, I'm scared. I don't want to die." I covered her hand with mine. "I won't let that happen. But if we don't do something, Andrew will keep controlling your life. You could be next." Tears pooled in her eyes, but she blinked them back, squaring her shoulders. "Okay, I'll do it. For Gabriel and for myself." The determination in her gaze startled me. She might have been terrified, but she was done being a victim. I squeezed her hand. "We'll do this carefully. Nick and I will plan every detail." Over the next few hours, we hammered out specifics. Cassandra would text Andrew or his associate, implying she had proof connecting him to Gabriel's death documents or recordings. She'd say she was ready to go public if he didn't meet her. We'd pick a warehouse or a disused office, set up Nick and maybe 1 or 2 officers in hiding. If Thorne arrived to silence her, we'd catch him in the act. The plan wasn't foolproof, but it was better than waiting for the next accident. As darkness fell, Cassandra returned to her hotel, phone in hand, ready to send that loaded message. Nick stayed in close contact with me. We agreed on a deserted building near the edge of town, half renovated, perfect for a quiet ambush. I found myself alone again in my office, the lamp flickering. A wave of memories washed over me: Fiona's betrayal, the savage beating I'd given Harper, the quiet hush of the settlement that ended my career. Now I was taking on a man who might be even more dangerous than Harper, a man who allegedly orchestrated an entire murder to protect his wealth. My fists clenched, old anger mixing with a sense of grim purpose. I wouldn't let Andrew slip away unscathed like Harper. If Andrew had truly ended Gabriel's life, tried to terrorize Cassandra, and threatened Emily, I was duty-bound to see him face consequences. My phone buzzed. Cassandra had sent the text, laced with hints of evidence. Now we waited to see if Thorne or any of Andrew's men would respond. I stared at the swirling dust motes in the lamplight, hearing the slow tick of the clock on the wall. Tension built inside me, not explosive but cold and steady quiet fury. This was revenge of a sort, but it was also justice for Gabriel, for Cassandra, and for the part of me that lost faith when Fiona broke our vows. Andrew embodied everything I despised: arrogance, manipulation, cruelty. Swallowing hard, I pinned up a final note on the corkboard. Wyatt Thorne linked to Andrew? Beneath it, I scrawled, trap. That single word encapsulated our plan, the turning point where Andrew would lose control of this twisted game. One slip from Thorne, and the entire edifice Andrew built would come crashing down. I switched off the lamp, letting the office sink into darkness. In the reflection of the blackened window, I caught sight of my own outline, a man shaped by betrayal, on the brink of payback. My heart pounded with a savage calm, urging me forward, because once Thorne arrived, once we had tangible proof, we'd haul Andrew Blackwood into the light. And if he thought he could destroy lives and walk away, he was about to learn just how deeply betrayal cuts when it's turned back on him. I was slumped behind my old desk with a throbbing ache in my ribs, the city's late morning light filtering through the dusty window blinds. A half-eaten sandwich lay forgotten at the edge of my desk, next to a black coffee gone cold. I didn't care much for eating anymore. My mind was fixated on Andrew Blackwood and the next step in bringing him down. My phone buzzed. I snapped it up so quickly I nearly fumbled it. "Marcus Pierce," I answered. "Hey, it's Aaron Reed," said a brisk voice. Aaron was a cyber forensics friend Nick Barnes had roped in quietly, a guy who specialized in following digital money trails. "I've got something on Andrew." I sat up straighter, ignoring the way my ribs twinged. "Tell me," I said, adrenaline sparking in my chest. Aaron spoke quickly. "Large withdrawals from Blackwood's personal account. 2 big transactions, each for $50,000. Both around the times Gabriel Myers died, and Cassandra first reported feeling threatened. The money was routed to an unlisted LLC, probably a shell company." I jotted down notes on a spare legal pad. "Think it ties directly to the boat accident?" "I can't confirm the exact usage," Aaron admitted, "but it's suspicious timing. If we dig deeper, we might link that LLC to a known enforcer or a third party who carried out Andrew's dirty work." "Perfect," I breathed. "Send everything to Nick. And thanks, Aaron, this could crack the case." Once I hung up, I felt a rush of grim satisfaction. Andrew might have tried to erase his tracks, but people like him often left digital breadcrumbs. 2 large withdrawals. That money matched the timeline around Gabriel's death and the intimidation attempts on Cassandra. If we could prove he was paying someone likely Wyatt Thorne, we'd corner him. I texted Nick. "Aaron has bank data. Looks good." A minute later, Nick replied, "Meet me at the station in an hour." While getting ready to leave, I heard footsteps in the hallway. The door opened, revealing Cassandra. She appeared tense, eyes flitting to the half-closed blinds as if she expected someone to leap out. Dressed in a dark cardigan and jeans, she looked more modest than the elegant socialite I first tailed. "How are you holding up?" I asked gently, waving her to the worn armchair near my desk. She sank down, hugging herself. "Andrew just got back in town. I saw him briefly at the house to grab more clothes. He didn't say much, just gave me that cold stare. It felt like he was sizing me up." I nodded. "You sure he doesn't suspect we're building a case?" Cassandra swallowed, glancing at the bandage on her forearm, a souvenir from the near-mugging. I played dumb, acted like I was still shaken by Gabriel's death. Andrew told me I needed rest, and he'd be dealing with some corporate matters all week. The way he said it, it was like a veiled threat. I motioned for her to pass me her phone. We'd installed an encrypted messaging app so she could forward any suspicious texts from Andrew or unknown numbers. So far, Andrew seemed to be keeping things quiet. Nick's close to requesting a warrant, I told her, tapping through the app. We have a lead on Andrew's bank transfers. If it pans out, we can link him to Wyatt Thorne. Cassandra's lips parted in relief. That's good. Maybe then the police will protect me. She paused, her voice going soft. Thank you, Marcus. No one else has tried so hard to help me. For a moment, I recalled how powerless I felt after Fiona's betrayal, like the walls were caving in and nobody was on my side. You're not alone, I said simply. We'll see this through. She left soon after, and I grabbed my jacket, ignoring the dull ache along my ribcage. The drive to the station was a blur of city traffic and my own churning thoughts. If we pinned Andrew to these payouts, he might come unhinged. Men like him weren't used to losing control. At the precinct, I found Nick hunched over a desk piled with files. He wore a tired grin. Just got off the phone with the DA's office, he said softly. We're one piece of solid evidence away from an arrest warrant. The bank records are compelling, but we need direct testimony tying Andrew to the murder. I rubbed my temples. What about Cassandra's statements? She can confirm Andrew threatened her, but that's not direct evidence he sabotaged Gabriel's boat. Nick sighed. Exactly. We need Wyatt Thorne to roll on Andrew, or at least some record emails, calls where Andrew orders the hit. I thought of the note pinned to my office corkboard. Trap Thorne, flip him on Andrew. We'd planned to lure Wyatt out, but it hadn't fully come together. We can still set up a sting, force Wyatt's hand if he meets Cassandra or tries to silence her. Nick tapped a folder labeled with Wyatt's name. He's slippery. No known home address, just a few rumored hideouts. I've got plainclothes officers asking around. If we can locate him, maybe we can corner him into a confession. I looked at the clock on the wall. We should also check Andrew's corporate records. Cassandra mentioned he's heading to his headquarters tomorrow morning for a major board meeting. I recalled a rumor that Andrew's empire was facing a shakeup. If he feels the pressure, he might act rashly. Nick nodded. I'll see what I can do about pulling background on his corporation. In the meantime, keep Cassandra close. Keep your phone on. If Andrew or Thorne makes a move, we jump on it. We parted ways, each of us with a dozen tasks swirling in our heads. On my way out, I spotted a small cluster of uniformed officers giving me side glances. I wasn't exactly popular at the precinct after the fiasco with Captain Harper, but at least Nick still had my back. I made a mental note. We were near the finish line, but we needed a final puzzle piece to lock Andrew down for good. That evening, I sat in my dim office, flipping through the fresh data Aaron Reed had sent me. The bank records were damning. Date-stamped withdrawals mere hours before Gabriel's boat accident. Another chunk of money withdrawn shortly before Cassandra's staged mugging. My pulse hammered as I realized how neatly it all tied together. Andrew was likely bankrolling Wyatt Thorne. My biggest question was how to prove it beyond a paper trail. Around 10, my phone buzzed. A text from Emily popped up. Made it to my cousin's place. Quiet out here. Worried about you. My chest tightened. She'd left town days ago after the threats, and I'd told her I'd keep her updated. I typed back, I'm close. Miss you. Then I set the phone aside, exhaling. Once Andrew was behind bars, maybe Emily and I could try something normal again. My thoughts drifted to Fiona for a moment, the swirl of old hurts threatening to overshadow my determination. With Andrew, it felt personal, like avenging not just Gabriel and Cassandra, but the piece of me that got trampled when Fiona cheated. I forced myself to refocus on the evidence. There was no time to wallow in personal grudges. Outside, the city streets were quiet. I rummaged through a stack of old case notes, then pinned new printouts of Andrew's financial transactions to the board, drawing red arrows between dates. The lines formed a pattern that spelled out premeditation. Andrew likely believed money solved everything. But not this time. Glancing at the clock nearly midnight, I realized I needed rest if I was going to meet Nick early. Gathering my coat, I paused at the door, eyeing the corkboard. The puzzle was almost complete. One more piece, I thought. Then we'd have Andrew cornered. Morning arrived with an overcast sky and a biting wind that whistled down the alleys. I met Nick at a diner on the south side, a hole-in-the-wall place with vinyl booths that stuck to your clothes. The coffee was hot, though, which was all I cared about. "Good news," Nick said, sliding into the booth across from me. "We got a lead on Wyatt Thorne's location. One of our plainclothes recognized him hanging around a condemned building near the riverfront." My heart pounded. "You sure it's him?" Nick nodded, stirring cream into his coffee. "Matches the description and the partial prints we lifted off a leftover cigarette butt at Cassandra's property." He set his mug down. "We could raid the place, but it'd be better to draw him out. Too many unknowns if we storm in blind." I sipped my own coffee, thoughts swirling. What if we use Cassandra again? Have her send a message implying she found new evidence something Andrew desperately wants destroyed? Nick frowned. It's risky putting her in the line of fire. But we do need Thorne to reveal himself. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I'll be there along with backup. We lure Thorne to a controlled spot. Once he makes a move, we arrest him. We push him to flip on Andrew. Nick hesitated. "Okay, but we better ensure Cassandra's safe." He cracked his knuckles. "We're skating on thin ice, doing this off the books." An hour later, we looped Cassandra in via a hush-hush phone call. She agreed nervously to text Andrew with a carefully worded threat, that she'd hand damning evidence of Gabriel's murder to the press, unless Andrew met her at a rundown riverside lot. We guessed Andrew would dispatch Thorne to intercept. Cassandra would only be physically present until Thorne showed his face. Then we'd pull her out. The plan took shape rapidly, aided by the few trustworthy officers Nick rallied. We chose late afternoon, just before dusk, when the area was quiet. The abandoned lot had a single chain-link fence and a rusted shipping container enough cover to hide Nick's team. I arrived early, scanning for vantage points. The wind gusted, carrying the stench of the nearby river. Cassandra showed up in a plain car wearing a black hoodie and jeans. Her hands shook when she stepped out, but her jaw was set. "Let's finish this," she said in a low voice. I gave her a tight nod. "Stay calm. The second Thorne appears, you move behind the shipping container. Officers are waiting." She exhaled shakily, nodding. Nick and two plainclothes officers hid inside the container. I positioned myself behind a stack of old pallets, crowbar in hand. I couldn't shake the memory of the last time I faced Thorne's thugs. My ribs still ached in reminder. We waited. The sky darkened. Cassandra paced, phone in hand. Then we saw headlights. A black SUV rolled in, tires crunching gravel. My pulse throbbed as the passenger door opened. Out stepped a tall figure in a dark hoodie, broad shoulders. Wyatt Thorne himself. He scanned the lot, one hand tucked inside his jacket, likely on a gun. Cassandra stiffened. Her breathing grew rapid, and for a moment, she seemed rooted to the spot. Thorne approached, voice echoing in the silence. "Where's your evidence?" he demanded. I could see Cassandra's face, pale but determined. "I'm not handing anything over until I see the money," she said, playing the bluff we rehearsed. "That Andrew promised hush money." Thorne scoffed. "Andrew doesn't negotiate with traitors. Hand over whatever you have." Their exchange was short, but tension snapped like a live wire. Thorne lunged, grabbing Cassandra's wrist. She let out a startled cry. That was our cue. I rushed forward, Nick and his team sprinting from the container. "Police!" Nick shouted, badge flashing. "Hands up!" Thorne whirled, eyes wild. He drew a pistol in a blur of movement. I shouted, "Gun!" and ducked behind the pallets. Nick's team scattered, guns drawn, yelling for Thorne to drop his weapon. But Thorne fired a shot. Thankfully, it went wide, ricocheting off the container with a metallic clang. Cassandra screamed, scrambling behind a stack of broken pallets. My heart hammered. Thorne tried to dash back to the SUV, but one of the plainclothes tackled him. They wrestled in the gravel, the pistol skittering away. I sprang forward, crowbar in hand, to help. Thorne was bigger, stronger, thrashing like a wild animal. Nick jammed his knee into Thorne's side, and the other officer secured his arms. "It's over!" Nick barked. Thorne kept struggling, cursing Andrew's name in a frenzy. "That bastard set me up." Those words pricked my ears. Set me up? The plainclothes pinned Thorne's arms behind his back, slapping on cuffs. Thorne spat at the ground, eyes blazing. "I ain't talking," he hissed. "You can't pin anything on me." Nick yanked him upright. "We already have enough attempted assault, resisting arrest, weapon charges, and if we dig further, we might connect you to Gabriel Myers' murder. That's a life sentence, Thorne." Sweat poured down Thorne's face, though the evening chill was biting. "Screw you," he growled, but I caught a flicker of fear in his eyes. I stood there panting, the crowbar dangling from my hand. Cassandra emerged, trembling but unharmed. I rushed over, gently holding her shoulders. "You okay?" She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "Yes, thank you." Nick motioned for the plainclothes to haul Thorne into the SUV used by the department. As they shoved him inside, Thorne glared at me with pure hatred. "I hope Andrew buries you," he snarled, voice cracking. An hour later, in a small back room of the precinct, Nick and I watched through the one-way glass as Thorne fumed in an interrogation room. He refused to say a word, arms folded, jaw clenched. The plan was to let him stew for a bit, realize how dire his situation was. Finally, Nick entered, leaning against the table. I stayed behind the glass, letting him work. "You're looking at attempted murder charges," Nick said evenly. "And that's before we factor in your connection to Gabriel Myers' death. Make this easy on yourself. If Andrew hired you, say so." Thorne stared at the wall, refusing eye contact. Nick pressed on, reminding him of the boat sabotage, the bribes, the intimidation. Thorne exhaled, face tight with pent-up anger. After a long silence, he muttered, "I didn't sabotage that damn boat. Andrew had someone else do it. I handled the follow-up." Nick perked up. "Follow-up? Threatening Cassandra? Going after Marcus Pierce?" Thorne flicked his gaze at the mirror as if sensing my presence. "I just follow orders. Andrew calls. I handle problems, that's all." Nick gripped the back of the chair. "Then Andrew paid you for the problems involving Cassandra?" A tense beat passed. Thorne finally nodded, almost imperceptibly. My heart pounded behind the glass. We had him. Thorne was confirming Andrew's direct link. It wasn't a full confession about Gabriel's murder, but it might be enough for the DA to lean on Thorne for more details in exchange for a plea deal. When Nick emerged, his face was grim but triumphant. "He's breaking. Told me Andrew personally authorized intimidation payments, that plus the financial records from Aaron could be enough. We can secure a warrant for Andrew's arrest for conspiracy, possibly murder if Thorne cooperates further." Relief flooded me, tinged with savage satisfaction. Andrew's house of cards was tumbling. "So Thorne's downfall is Andrew's downfall," I murmured. Nick gave a cautious nod. "We'll see how it holds up, but it's damn strong. Let me call the DA." My phone vibrated a text from Cassandra. "Is it over?" I texted back. "We got Thorne in custody. Stay safe. Next step, Andrew." As Nick walked off to make his call, I slumped into a chair. My entire body felt shaky with pent-up tension. Thorne's capture was a milestone. Now we'd move to Andrew himself, the final piece. The man who believed he could buy anyone, silence anyone. Soon he'd be facing the full weight of the law. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the adrenaline subside. This was for Gabriel, for Cassandra, for Emily, and maybe for that part of me that once lost everything at the hands of a powerful man. Andrew had no idea that in trying to bury his misdeeds, he'd ignited a quiet fury in people who refused to be pawns. The next morning, Nick received the official arrest warrant for Andrew on charges of conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. Thorne's partial confession, paired with the suspicious financial records, had swayed the DA. We moved quickly before Andrew's lawyers could sense trouble brewing. Standing beside Nick in the precinct hallway, I felt an electric pulse of vindication. "We do this publicly," Nick said, his expression cold with resolve. "No more hush-hush. Andrew should be taken in front of his own employees, so there's no question of favoritism or special deals." I nodded, remembering how Captain Harper was quietly shielded years ago. "I'm with you," I said. "Let's make sure Andrew feels the consequences." We assembled a small team, Nick in the lead, a few uniformed officers, and me. A plainclothes detective named Rodriguez volunteered too. Blackwood's a big fish, he muttered, loading his sidearm. Taking him in might rattle some cages downtown. The plan was to confront Andrew at Blackwood Corporation's headquarters, a sleek glass tower that rose above the city skyline. He was there for a board meeting. Cassandra confirmed his schedule by text, still in hiding at the hotel. My heart pounded as we drove over in two unmarked cars. Scenes from my confrontation with Harper flickered in my mind, another high-ranking figure, another betrayal. We parked on a side street to avoid tipping Andrew off. Striding up the marble lobby steps felt surreal. Gold accents, polished floors, soft classical music. The security guard looked startled as Nick flashed his badge. "Detective Barnes, we're here for Andrew Blackwood," Nick said firmly. The guard stammered something about needing an appointment. Nick showed the warrant. "Does this suffice?" The guard swallowed and stepped aside. A wave of uneasy tension settled over the lobby as we headed to the elevator banks. During the ride up, Nick glanced at me. "You sure you're ready for this?" I flexed my bruised knuckles. "I've been ready since Gabriel died." My voice came out calm, but inside I was a riot of emotions, anger, excitement, a dash of fear. The elevator chimed on the executive floor, opening to a spacious reception area with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city skyline. The receptionist, a sleek-looking woman in a fitted suit, tried to halt us, but Nick brushed past her. "Police business," he stated. In a glass-walled conference room, Andrew Blackwood sat at the head of a table with half a dozen suited executives, some flipping through spreadsheets, others sipping coffee. He looked up, annoyance flashing across his features as he recognized Nick and me. "What is this?" Andrew demanded, standing. The other executives shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting. Nick stepped forward, producing the warrant. "Andrew Blackwood, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and other related charges. Turn around, hands behind your back." For a heartbeat, Andrew froze, face turning ashen. Then his eyes snapped with fury. "Conspiracy to commit? Are you out of your mind?" He shot a look at me. "Pierce, you scumbag! You orchestrated this, didn't you?" I met his gaze, unblinking. "We have evidence linking you to Gabriel Myers' death and the attempts on Cassandra's life. And Wyatt Thorne is in custody," I added, letting that detail land like a hammer. Andrew's mask cracked. He reached for something, maybe his phone, maybe the door. But Nick and Rodriguez stepped forward, one on each side. The uniformed officers hovered near the door. Andrew tried to jerk free, but Nick grabbed his arm, twisting it behind his back with practiced force. Andrew hissed in pain. "You can't do this," he snarled. "I have resources. I'll destroy you all in court." Rodriguez smirked. "Tell it to the judge." As Nick snapped the cuffs on, Andrew twisted his neck to glare at me. "You think you've won? I'll bury you in lawsuits. You have no idea who you're messing with." I felt a sudden surge of the old rage from the day I caught Fiona cheating like I wanted to lash out physically. But I held it in, stepping closer. "You manipulated everyone around you," I said quietly. "You paid Wyatt Thorne to threaten Cassandra, kill Gabriel, and come after me. You used your money like a weapon, but not anymore." Andrew sneered, chest heaving, but I saw fear behind his eyes. The executives in the conference room looked on in shock. Some whispered into their phones. Others simply stared. Nick hauled Andrew toward the door. As we passed the stunned receptionist, Andrew spat, "Fire them all, you hear me?" "You're all fired." But no one moved. It felt surreal, strolling through the pristine lobby with Andrew in cuffs, his outrage crackling in the air. People gasped. Phones flashed as they snapped pictures, capturing the moment the mighty Andrew Blackwood was led away by the police. My heart thundered with a mixture of triumph and unease. It's finally happening. Outside, the bright morning sun glinted off the patrol cars parked out front. Reporters or bystanders might as well have been invisible to me. All I saw was Andrew, pinned in the back seat, raging against the glass. My mind flashed to Harper's face when I confronted him all those years ago. The difference was that this time, I had no illusions about the outcome. Andrew would be processed, fingerprinted, face a real interrogation. The system wouldn't hush this scandal. Nick turned to me, brow creased. "You all right?" I exhaled, tension flooding out. "Yeah," I said. though I felt a swirl of conflicting emotions. Let's get him booked. At the precinct, Andrew refused to answer questions, demanding a lawyer. He ranted about his rights and threatened legal action against Nick, me, the entire department. But the evidence, the financial logs, Thorne's confession, and Cassandra's statements was damning enough for the DA to file formal charges. Once Andrew was placed in a holding cell, Nick and I stepped into the hallway. Cassandra stood there, twisting her hands together, eyes full of anxiety. She must have gotten word from me to come in and finalize her statement. "Is it done?" she asked, voice trembling. I nodded. "He's in custody. This is just the start, though there'll be a trial, maybe more wrangling from his legal team." Cassandra's shoulders sagged in relief. "I can't believe it's really happening. He always seemed untouchable." Nick gave her a reassuring smile. "He's far from untouchable now. The DA wants to talk with you to finalize details. We have enough for a strong case." She closed her eyes briefly. "Thank you, both of you." She reached out to squeeze my arm. "I owe you my life." I felt a pang of guilt, recalling how close she came to harm, how Gabriel wasn't as lucky. "Just tell the truth," I said quietly. "We'll do the rest." After Cassandra was led to a private office, Nick patted my back. "Good work, Pierce. Let's hope this time justice sticks." I nodded, recalling my own brush with injustice years ago. Fiona's betrayal had led me to lose my badge, my future, but now I was on the other side, ensuring a manipulative power player got what he deserved. Part of me savored the irony. The rest felt a quiet heaviness. It's never really over until the courts decide. Driving back to my office, the city's bustle swirled around me. Everything looked oddly brighter. Andrew's arrest was a victory, but it was tinged with the memory of Gabriel's death. He wouldn't get a second chance. Cassandra was free, but she'd carry emotional scars for life. And me? I could feel that old bitterness loosening its grip, replaced by a cautious sense of closure. When I parked, I slumped in the seat, letting out a shaky breath. Andrew Blackwood was in cuffs, humiliated before his entire board. A pang of satisfaction coursed through me. This was more than a paycheck or a job done. It was vindication for all the times powerful men thought they could walk over us. 2 days later, I found myself standing outside the courthouse after Andrew's first arraignment. He'd appeared in a crisp suit, probably at his lawyer's insistence, but his posture screamed defiance, and the judge didn't grant him any easy concessions. Bail was set high, the charges read out in front of a gallery of reporters. The media swarmed for a statement, but Andrew stared them down, jaw clenched. He still had resources, but the tide was turning. I hung back, watching from near the pillars as Cassandra discreetly left, head lowered to avoid cameras. Nick was talking to a reporter in hushed tones. The sky was a bland, gray, threatening rain. A familiar voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Hey, detective," Emily said softly, stepping to my side. She'd arrived the night before, texted me about meeting after the hearing. Worry lined her features. I felt a surge of relief, folding her into a gentle hug. "Glad you're here." She laid a palm on my chest, glancing around at the commotion. "You've been through the ringer," she said, eyes searching mine. "I saw the coverage. Looks like Andrew's finally facing justice." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yeah, he's been charged. It'll be a while before the trial, but at least Cassandra's safe now." Emily's gaze flicked to Nick, still fielding questions. "What about you? Are you safe?" I thought of Wyatt Thorne, locked up in jail, likely trying to negotiate a plea. For now, Thorne gave up Andrew as the one who ordered the hits. We expect more confessions. Without Andrew's money backing him, Thorne's basically alone. She exhaled, relief coloring her expression. So this whole nightmare could end. A hint of unease gnawed at me, though. It might, but Andrew's not the type to roll over easily. He could have a legal dream team, might claim innocence, try to discredit me or Cassandra. Emily linked her arm through mine. "We'll handle it if it comes," she said, softly resolute. We walked away from the courthouse crowds and found a quiet cafe down the street. Over steaming cups of coffee, we finally had a moment to breathe. Emily studied me across the small table. "You look different," she said. I managed a wry smile. Bruised ribs? Or the weight off my shoulders? She gave a half-laugh, eyes flicking over my face. Both. But I also see something else, some darkness in your eyes that wasn't there before. I stiffened, remembering the rage I felt pummeling Harper years ago, the same fury that flared when Andrew threatened to kill Cassandra and harm Emily. I got a taste for vengeance, I admitted quietly. Turns out, that can be addictive. Part of me wanted Andrew to suffer more than just an arrest. That side of me scares me sometimes. Emily reached out, covering my hand with hers. You're not a monster, Marcus. You did what was necessary to protect people. Her words offered comfort, but a subtle tension remained in my chest. I appreciate that, I said. I remember how I lost control with Harper. This time I managed to rein it in. I paused, swallowing, but I came close, real close. She squeezed my hand, not saying anything for a moment. The cafe buzzed softly around us, other patrons murmuring, coffee machines whirring. Everyday life, oblivious to the drama we'd been living. Eventually, she said, I'm relieved Andrew's behind bars, but part of me worries about how deeply you get pulled into these vendettas. Maybe after the trial you should take a break. Focus on your life, not just your anger. My immediate impulse was to argue, but a flicker of recognition sparked. She was right. I'd built my PI business partly out of bitterness, chasing justice because I'd been robbed of my chance to do it as a cop. Now, with Andrew caught and Fiona's betrayal receding into the past, maybe I could find a healthier path. I'll think about it, I said softly, forcing a small smile. We finished our coffee in a comfortable silence, the tension in my shoulders slowly easing. Once I settled the bill, we stepped outside into a light drizzle. Emily opened her umbrella, holding it above us. Let's go somewhere quieter, she suggested. You look like you could use a normal evening. A normal evening. It sounded almost alien, but I followed her without hesitation, letting the gentle patter of rain accompany our footsteps. For the first time in ages, I felt a sliver of peace, like the storms in my head were finally dying down. Later that night, after Emily dropped me off at my apartment, I found myself standing in the dimly lit living room, staring at my reflection in the dark window. I recalled Andrew's venomous threats in the high-rise office, recalled Thorne's furious eyes when he was cuffed, recalled the final moments of Gabriel Myers' life, cut short by a man who thought he could buy immunity. I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling. Andrew's downfall gave me a grim satisfaction, yes, but it also reminded me how destructive unchecked power can be, and it reminded me how dangerously close I came to losing my humanity in the pursuit of payback. My phone buzzed with a message from Nick. Andrew's in county jail until he posts bail, if he can. Don't let your guard down. We still have a ways to go. A quiet victory, that's what it felt like, albeit incomplete. The trial loomed. Cassandra would still need my support, and the DA would want my testimony. There were no fireworks or heroic medals at the end of this takedown, just the slow turning of the legal system. But that was enough, because at least now, Andrew was behind bars, stripped of his invincible aura. Emily texted me soon after, got home safe. Don't brood too much. I smirked at her intuitive nudge. For once, I let the tension slip away. I didn't need to brood. I'd done enough of that for a lifetime. Gabriel might never get a second chance, but Cassandra had one. Emily and I had one, and I had to hold on to that. Crossing the room, I paused at the corkboard where I'd pinned every detail. Photos of Gabriel smiling at a cafe, Cassandra's schedule, Andrew's suspicious transactions. I started removing them, piece by piece, dropping them into a manila folder labeled with Andrew's name. The official evidence would go to the DA. My personal notes were no longer needed on the wall. When the last paper came down, I stared at the blank cork. It struck me that for the first time in a while, I didn't feel the weight of unfinished business. Harper, my old nemesis, still hovered somewhere in my past, but that was a ghost I could face another day. Right now, Andrew's arrest was a real step toward justice. For Cassandra, for Gabriel, and maybe for the part of me that believed in redemption. I flicked off the overhead light, leaving only the small desk lamp glowing. In that gentle cone of light, my office looked almost serene. I realized something then. I wasn't alone in this. Nick, Emily, even Cassandra, they'd all played a part. I'd found a sense of belonging I never thought possible after my divorce and dismissal from the force. A quiet voice inside whispered that I was healing. Sure, the trial could stir fresh turmoil, but for now, I allowed myself a rare moment of contentment. I locked the office door, stepping out into the hallway with my keys jingling. Outside, the rain had eased to a fine mist, streetlights reflecting in small puddles. I walked home under that hazy glow, ribs still sore but spirit lighter. So ended the day I'd finally taken down Andrew Blackwood. No dramatic shootout, no grand cinematic finale, just a slow, methodical confrontation that left him in chains. And as I climbed the worn stairs to my apartment, I kept thinking, sometimes a quiet victory is the best kind. Because behind the quiet lay resolve, a promise that from now on, people like Andrew wouldn't get the last word, not while I was still standing. Life after Andrew Blackwood's arrest felt as though someone had flipped a switch in the city. Almost overnight, newspapers and local news stations erupted with headlines. A well-dressed millionaire in handcuffs always stirred public curiosity. As a result, my phone lit up daily calls from curious acquaintances, old colleagues fishing for inside info. I ignored most of them. I had no desire to feed the rumor mill. Yet in the days immediately following the arrest, I was anything but idle. I spent countless hours poring over additional documents with Nick Barnes, trying to ensure the DA had every scrap of evidence linking Andrew to Gabriel's death and to Wyatt Thorne's crimes. Nick kept reminding me that my testimony might be crucial. One evening, as we huddled in a cramped conference room at the precinct, he gave me a pointed look across the battered table. "Marcus, you realize the defense is going to come at you hard, right?" he said, flipping through a thick file. "They'll use your past, the assault on Captain Harper, the forced resignation. They'll say you hold a personal grudge against powerful men." I tensed, the old bitterness resurfacing. "I know," I said quietly. "But if that's the cost of seeing Andrew pay for what he's done, so be it." Nick nodded. "Just wanted to warn you. The DA wants to keep your background under wraps, but you know how defense lawyers operate. Be ready." I breathed a sigh, remembering how easily the system once crushed me when I confronted Harper. This time, though, I had no illusions. My past might be an Achilles' heel, but I wasn't about to hide from it. News of Andrew's arrest also prompted an unexpected wave of new clients for Pierce investigations. People with shady spouses or complicated disputes saw me as the PI who took down a big fish. But ironically, I found myself feeling drained. The adrenaline that fueled me through Andrew's takedown had left me. In its place was a quiet exhaustion, tinged with leftover anger I couldn't fully explain. Sometimes I'd wake at night, heart pounding, thinking I heard Wyatt Thorne's threats echoing. Other times I replayed that moment of punching Harper years ago, a raw reminder of how easily my rage could explode. Emily Collins noticed my restlessness. She'd returned to the city, dividing her time between her job and checking in on me. One evening, I was slumped on my office couch, analyzing post-arrest coverage on my tablet, when she let herself in with a gentle knock. "You look like you're about to melt into that cushion," she teased softly. But there was genuine worry in her eyes. I managed a faint smile. "Long day with the DA's office," I said, setting aside the tablet. "They want me to detail every step, every suspicion I had about Andrew. Feels like living it all over again." She sat next to me, taking my hand. "Sometimes living it again is the only way to move on," she said. Her fingers traced a faint bruise on my knuckles, a relic from the brawl with Thorne's men. "But it doesn't mean you have to do it alone." I squeezed her hand in silent gratitude. The truth was, I still wrestled with the knowledge that I'd come perilously close to losing control again. The memory of Captain Harper lingered in my mind like a ghost, a reminder of my capacity for violence when pushed. Andrew's arrest had reopened that wound, showing me how easily old rage could resurface if I felt threatened. Just then, the office phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. Emily arched an eyebrow. "You sure you don't need that?" "Not tonight," I said, exhaling. "Let them leave a message. I'm done for the day." I didn't want any more business calls or sensational questions from reporters. She rested her head on my shoulder. "Nick told me the DA might subpoena you as a star witness." I grunted. "Might? That's pretty much a guarantee." Emily shifted, looking up at me. "Are you okay with that?" I stared at the ceiling. I don't relish the idea of being on the stand, airing my personal baggage. But Andrew has to face justice for killing Gabriel and nearly destroying Cassandra's life. I'm the best shot at making sure that happens. She watched me in silence for a few beats. Then, in a gentle tone, she asked, "And after?" "After," I echoed, letting the word hang. What does life look like once Andrew is behind bars? For so long, I'd been running on vengeance and adrenaline, first over Fiona, then Andrew. I shrugged. I guess I'll figure it out. A week later, the press coverage was still intense. Cassandra and I had a brief coffee meet-up near my office, trying to keep things low-key. She was steadily regaining composure, no longer glancing over her shoulder every few minutes, but her eyes still carried a sadness that spoke volumes. "So, the papers call me the tragic widow of high society," she said, voice trembling between bitterness and dark humor. As if I was actually Andrew's wife, not just his puppet. They ignore that I was trying to leave him before all this. I shook my head. The media always twists narratives. Don't let them define you. She nodded, fiddling with the rim of her coffee cup. I owe you and Nick everything. Without you, I don't know. She swallowed, tears glinting. Gabriel would still be gone, but I'd probably be next. My throat tightened. You deserved better from the start. I'm just glad you're safe. Cassandra gave a small, grateful smile. Nick said the DA wants my testimony too. I'll do whatever it takes, even if it means reliving that night. Her courage reminded me of my own reasons for facing the trial head-on. We parted ways with a shared sense that this was the aftermath, messy, painful, but at least heading toward closure. Later that evening, Nick dropped by my office unexpectedly, wearing a weary expression. "Busy day?" I asked, gesturing to the worn chairs near my desk. He sank down, rubbing his temples. "The department's dealing with fallout from Andrew's arrest. He had connections at City Hall and the Chamber of Commerce. Now they're all scrambling to distance themselves from him." "Figures," I muttered. "Can't be seen supporting a suspected murderer." Nick sighed. "On top of that, we got a call from Harper's old pals." He shot me a cautious look. "They were fishing for info about you. Probably worried more skeletons might come out." My stomach clenched at the mention of Harper. "They can fish all they want. We're not digging into that unless they push me." He nodded. "Just keep your guard up. Some old-timers in the force still side with Harper." A pause. "But in better news, the DA's building a solid case. This is going to trial soon." I exhaled, a complicated swirl of relief and dread swirling in my chest. "I'll be ready." When Nick left, I stared out the office window at the neon city glow. The aftershocks were real shockwaves of Andrew's downfall rippled everywhere, even dredging up my past with Harper. But beneath that tension, I sensed a fragile sort of optimism. Cassandra was free from Andrew. Emily stood by me, unwavering. Nick had proven a steadfast friend. Maybe, just maybe, I was finally allowed to step out of the darkness that once consumed me. It started as Emily's offhand suggestion one Sunday afternoon. "Marcus, have you thought about finding a new place? Something bigger, more permanent than that cramped apartment?" I blinked at her across a diner booth. We were sharing a late brunch, eggs, crispy bacon, and coffee. "I mean, sure, I've thought about it," I said slowly, cutting into my omelet. "But I'm barely home these days. My office is practically my second apartment." She gave me a gentle smile. "That's exactly why you need somewhere that feels like a real home. A haven." Her choice of words struck a chord. I'd left the house I once shared with Fiona in the rearview mirror of my life, never wanting to own anything so personal again. But maybe Emily was right. I was pushing 40, living out of a one-bedroom with half my stuff still in boxes. Did I want that to be my life forever? A few days later, Emily insisted I meet a real estate contact of hers, a friend named Diane who specialized in older homes with character. Initially, I scoffed at the idea. "I don't have time," I grumbled. But Emily gave me that determined look, the one that said, "Stop making excuses." So on a cloudy Tuesday morning, I found myself standing with Emily outside a wrought iron gate in an older, tree-lined neighborhood. Diane was a tall woman with a warm smile, flipping through pages on her clipboard. "You're going to love this property," she promised, unlocking the gate. "It's a historic Tudor-style house, built in the 1920s. Needs some updating, but the bones are good." We stepped down a short cobblestone path toward a two-story structure with ivy creeping up the brick walls. My skepticism melted away as soon as I set eyes on it. There was something about the place grand yet intimate, like it had stories tucked into its walls. Emily caught my expression and grinned. Inside, the house had hardwood floors that creaked but felt sturdy. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns on the floor. Diane explained the details. 5 bedrooms, a spacious living area with a fireplace, a wraparound porch that could be perfect for quiet evenings. "I can imagine you curled up with a coffee, reading case files by the fire," Emily teased, walking ahead to peek into the kitchen. She paused, turning back to me. "You look shell-shocked. Are you okay?" I ran my hand over the banister. "Yeah, it's just, I never pictured myself wanting a house again. Not since Fiona," she finished softly. "But times change, Marcus. You've changed." Her words stirred a warmth in my chest. Maybe I had changed. The man who lost everything after Harper's betrayal was no longer the sum total of my identity. I was forging new connections, Emily, for one, and letting old wounds scab over. Owning a house again suddenly felt less like a trap and more like a fresh start. We spent an hour exploring every nook: the dusty attic with a small round window, the backyard that stretched into a modest garden patch. My imagination flickered. Cookouts with Nick, maybe a dog scampering around. Quiet mornings with Emily on the porch, sipping coffee. It was surreal, but also possible. Diane left us to wander alone for a bit. Emily lingered in the dining room, running her fingers along a built-in china cabinet. "I can see us here," she whispered, almost to herself. Then she glanced at me, a little shy. "I mean you. I don't want to presume." My chest tightened with unexpected emotion. The idea of us made me realize how close we'd become. She'd been my anchor through the darkest times, never letting me drown in bitterness or revenge. "No," I said, stepping close. "I want you to be part of this if you're willing." A gentle smile curved her lips. "I wouldn't be here otherwise." We told Diane we'd think about it, though my gut told me I was already half in love with the place. That evening, while I sat in my cramped apartment, I pulled up the house listing on my phone. The photos didn't do it justice, but just seeing them made me feel a surge of excitement. It was a terrifying emotion, because it meant committing to something beyond my solitary bubble. The next morning, I made a call to my bank. The settlement money from the city, plus the profits from a few successful PI gigs, meant I had enough saved for a down payment. The bank manager was polite, reminded me of interest rates, but overall gave me a green light. When I told Emily the news, she practically glowed. "Marcus, that's amazing. But are you sure?" I placed my hand over hers. "I'm sure. This time I want to build something good." We set the paperwork in motion, and over the following week I felt more alive than I had in years. Even Nick noticed. "You're whistling," he pointed out one day as we left the precinct. "You never whistle." I gave a self-conscious shrug. I guess I'm in a better place. Andrew's behind bars, Cassandra's safe, and I'm about to buy a house. Nick raised an eyebrow. "A house? You, the perpetual apartment dweller? I'll believe it when I see it." I laughed, surprising even myself at the ease of it. "I'll invite you to the housewarming. Bring your wife, or your sense of humor at least." A subtle shadow crossed his face. "Actually, Sarah and I are separated," he said quietly. "Didn't want to dump that on you during the Andrew fiasco." My chest tightened in empathy. "Nick, I'm sorry, I didn't know." He shrugged, feigning a casualness that didn't quite hold. "We're seeing a mediator. I'm hoping it's just a rough patch. But it's got me thinking this job can take a toll on relationships." I thought of how mine with Fiona shattered, though for different reasons. "If you need anything, you know where to find me," I offered softly. His eyes flickered with gratitude. "Thanks, man. Glad to see you're finding a better path." We parted ways, each lost in our own reflections on how precarious personal happiness can be. That night, after finishing the final forms for the house, Emily and I walked along the quiet sidewalk near my apartment. A crisp breeze rustled the trees overhead. She slipped her arm through mine. "This house," she said with a soft excitement. "You're not worried it might bring up old ghosts?" I shook my head. "No. Strangely, I feel more at peace now than I have in a long time. Maybe it's because I see a future beyond just being the bitter ex-detective. I paused, searching her eyes. You've helped me realize that. We ended the evening sitting on my worn couch sharing takeout. I told her about the first time I'd ever thought of buying a house when I was still a rookie cop, naive and dreaming of a stable family life. That dream died with Fiona's betrayal, but now it felt resurrected, albeit in a different shape. By the time we locked up and said goodnight, my mind buzzed with possibilities. The offer on the house was pending acceptance. I had no illusions that homeownership would solve all my problems, but it was a step forward, a symbol of healing after years of harboring anger. A couple days later, Diane called. Our offer was accepted. Emily rushed over to my office with coffee to celebrate. She laughed, hugging me tight, eyes shining. We're doing this, she whispered near tears. We're really doing this. I smiled, letting that warmth fill my chest. Home is where the heart heals, or so they say. For a man who once believed betrayal had stolen everything from him, the prospect of building a new life with someone I trusted felt extraordinary and terrifying, but mostly it felt right. A week after finalizing the house purchase, I found myself driving across town with a knot in my stomach. Fiona Pierce, my ex-wife, had reached out unexpectedly. A terse email popped into my inbox, subject line reading, "Let's talk, if you're willing." She didn't specify why or what changed. Part of me wanted to delete the message and move on, but another part recognized that ignoring her would leave a thread of unresolved tension. I'd been telling Emily and myself that I was done letting the past fester. This might be the final step toward truly letting go. We agreed to meet at a neutral spot, a small park near Fiona's new condo, mid-afternoon when few people would be around. The sky was a dull gray, promising rain. I arrived early, pacing near a bench under a bare oak tree. My mind flickered through a collage of memories our wedding day, the first time I found out she cheated with Harper, the searing humiliation, the divorce. My chest tightened. Fiona approached, wearing a plain coat, hair pulled back. She looked older, more subdued, no trace of the confident woman I once knew. She paused a few steps away, gaze darting with uncertainty. "Marcus," she said quietly, hands clasped. "Thank you for coming." I nodded, swallowing. "What's this about, Fiona?" She let out a shaky breath, looking down at the grass. "I heard rumors about your involvement in Andrew Blackwood's arrest, that you're testifying. It got me thinking about how things ended between us." A pause. I wanted to say I'm sorry. My heart lurched. For years I'd imagined hearing those words, but now they felt strangely hollow. "You're sorry," I repeated, not quite a question. "For cheating? For lying? Or for how it damaged my career?" Her eyes flicked to mine. "All of it," she said, voice trembling. "I was selfish. I told myself you were distant, that Harper was just attention I needed. But it was a betrayal, plain and simple." She swallowed, tears brimming. "I ruined us, and cost you your badge. I know I can't undo that, but I needed you to hear that I regret it. Truly." A part of me wanted to lash out, to remind her of the humiliations I endured. But something had shifted in me. The old anger didn't flare as hot. "Fiona, I spent years hating you," I admitted. "It ate away at me. But I've moved on now. I won't say your apology fixes everything, but I'm not living in that rage anymore." Her gaze softened, relief mingling with sorrow. "I'm glad you're moving on." She looked at the modest ring on her left hand. "I remarried last year," she said softly, as if anticipating my reaction. "He's a decent man. It's different this time." I studied her, searching for any sign of deception. But she seemed sincere, no arrogance or excuses. "I hope you're happy," I said, surprising myself by meaning it. A gentle drizzle began, speckling the bench and the shoulders of our coats. She exhaled, wiping her cheek. "I don't expect forgiveness, but maybe we can put the bitterness to rest?" I gave a small nod. "We already have, in my mind. I won't forget what happened, but I'm no longer defined by it. If that's what you mean by burying the bitterness, then yes, we can do that." She managed a tearful smile, stepping forward as if she might hug me. I didn't move away, but I also didn't reciprocate. The moment passed awkwardly, and she cleared her throat. Thank you, Marcus. And I hear you bought a house? I blinked. News travels fast. Her lips curved in a faint grin. Small city. Look, truly I'm glad you found your way, despite how we ended. The rain intensified, pattering on the tree branches overhead. Fiona glanced at the sky. I should go, but I'm grateful you gave me your time. I just nodded, letting her walk away. I stood there a while longer, the drizzle soaking into my jacket. My thoughts churned, a swirl of relief, sorrow, closure. The final pang of heartbreak I felt for Fiona was replaced by a sober acceptance. She was a chapter I'd finally finished reading, no footnotes needed. When I got home, Emily was there, flipping through a design magazine, presumably for the new house. She saw my expression and tensed. Everything okay? I hung up my damp coat. I met Fiona. Emily's eyes flickered with concern, but she didn't look jealous, just curious. How did it go? I shrugged, easing down beside her on the couch. She apologized, owned up to everything, seemed sincere. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. And you know what? I didn't feel much anger left. I guess that means I'm really done with that chapter. A tender smile crossed Emily's face. She rested her head on my shoulder. I'm proud of you. Letting go of resentment is hard, but it's a sign you're healing. I kissed her temple softly. Couldn't have done it without you, I admitted. Or Nick, or Cassandra, who reminded me that people can break free from manipulation. She looped her arm around mine. So did this conversation with Fiona leave you rattled, or do you feel lighter? Lighter, I said after a moment's thought. Like I stopped carrying a weight I didn't realize was so heavy. We sat in comfortable silence, the steady hum of the heater filling the space. Outside, the rain continued. Eventually, Emily reached for the magazine again, pointing to a photo of a refurbished living room in a 1920s home. Think we could do something like this for the new house? I grinned, leaning closer. Yeah, but we'll need to check if the floors can handle that built-in bookshelf. And maybe we can add a cozy reading nook in the corner. Her eyes lit up. Perfect. I'll start pinning ideas. We can show them to the contractor. That night, as I lay awake in bed, I reflected on how drastically my life had changed since Fiona's betrayal. I'd lost my career, my marriage, my sense of self, but I gained a second chance. Now, with Andrew behind bars awaiting trial, and Fiona's apology finally closing that wound, I felt an odd sense of calm. My phone buzzed once a text from Nick, probably more updates on the case. I ignored it, letting my eyes drift shut. Tomorrow was a new day, and for the first time in years, the future didn't scare me. If anything, it beckoned with quiet promise, a promise of healing, of building a real home, and maybe forging a life with Emily that wouldn't be tainted by betrayal. I welcomed that promise, letting the patter of rain lull me to sleep. The sense of forward momentum only grew stronger over the following weeks. The DA officially charged Andrew with murder in Gabriel Myers's case, along with conspiracy and attempted murder of Cassandra. Nick informed me that Wyatt Thorne had solidified his statement, implicating Andrew as the mastermind. The press devoured every new development, labeling the case Blackwood versus Justice. I found it both amusing and nauseating how quickly the media turned serious matters into catchy headlines. One day, while I was reorganizing old files in my office, Nick showed up unannounced. He had a worn expression, but an undercurrent of satisfaction. It's official, Andrew's indicted for first-degree murder, he said, closing the door behind him. He can try to fight it in court, but the evidence is overwhelming. I let out a long breath. So that's it. We did it. Nick nodded, dropping into the chair opposite my desk. The DA wants you on record as the key investigator linking Andrew's finances to Thorne, plus your eyewitness accounts of threats. You prepared to handle that in court? My stomach twisted. I recalled my conversation with Emily about how the defense might target my past, but I'd made my choice. I am, I said firmly. Whatever it takes. Nick mustered a tired smile. Good. We'll brief you on the specifics soon. He rose to leave, then paused. Oh, and your friend Cassandra wanted me to remind you that she's grateful, said she owes you a lifetime of thanks. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Tell her I said we're almost at the finish line. After Nick left, the reality sank in. Andrew's trial would loom large in my near future. A part of me dreaded testifying, but a bigger part knew this was the final step in seeing justice for Gabriel and for Cassandra, whose life Andrew tried to destroy. That afternoon, I strolled through the city's bustling downtown to the county clerk's office for some final paperwork on the new house. The clerk, a friendly older gentleman named Mr. Ellison, smiled as I slid documents across the counter. "Closing on a house, huh? Congratulations," he said, stamping forms with an official seal. "Thanks," I replied, feeling a little flutter in my chest. "Been a long time coming." He handed me a pen and pointed to the dotted line. As I signed, I realized how monumental this moment was. Me, stepping out from the shadows of bitterness, forging a tangible future. When Mr. Ellison smiled and handed me the keys symbolic, even if the actual set awaited me at the property, I felt my hand tremble slightly. That evening, I texted Emily to meet at the new house for a celebratory walk-through. She arrived, breathless from excitement, lugging a small bag of groceries. "I thought we could have a picnic on the living room floor," she said, eyes gleaming. "We don't have furniture here yet, but who cares?" Inside, the place smelled faintly of dust and old wood. We spread a blanket on the floor and unpacked bread, cheese, fruit, and a bottle of cheap champagne. The overhead light fixture barely worked, casting a dim glow across the wooden floors. Emily raised a plastic cup of champagne. "To new beginnings," she said softly. My cup clinked against hers. "To us," I amended, a gentle warmth spreading through my chest. We ate in companionable quiet, the distant hum of traffic filtering in through the open windows. Every so often, I'd catch her gaze sweeping the space with excitement, her excitement as well as mine. A gentle wind rattled the old windows, reminding me that the house needed some repairs, but it only added to the charm. Once we finished, I stood, rummaging in the pocket of my jacket. My heart hammered in my chest. I felt that old mix of fear and conviction I used to get right before stepping into a dangerous situation, only this time it was personal and nerve-wracking in a different way. Emily raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" Swallowing, I retrieved a small velvet box. Her eyes widened, breath catching. The room seemed to still, even the city noise fading. I held the box out, flipping it open to reveal a simple diamond ring, nothing extravagant, but carefully chosen. I cleared my throat, voice wavering. "Emily Collins, you stuck with me through the darkest times. You believed in me when I wasn't sure I believed in myself. You reminded me I could build a future, not just chase revenge." I paused, heart pounding. "Will you marry me?" Her hand flew to her mouth, eyes brimming with tears. For a second, I worried maybe I'd misread everything, but then she nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes. Yes, of course." I slid the ring onto her trembling finger, and she threw her arms around me, burying her face against my chest. We stood like that for a moment, a hush of raw emotion wrapping us. I tasted the salt of her tears on my cheek. The swirl of relief, joy, and gratitude nearly overwhelmed me. For so long, I believed I was destined to remain battered by betrayal. Now here I was, in an empty, echoing house that I actually owned, with a woman who saw me not as a tarnished ex-cop or a vengeful PI, but as a partner for life. Eventually, she pulled back, eyes shining. "You big softy," she teased, voice choked with emotion. "I can't believe—" She looked at the ring again. "It's perfect." I tried to speak, but my throat felt tight. Instead, I pressed my forehead to hers, letting the quiet moment speak for us. Outside, a car honked in the distance, an odd reminder that the world kept moving. But inside these walls, I felt suspended in warmth and possibility. When we finally gathered ourselves, Emily let out a shaky laugh. "We need to celebrate properly. I'll call Nick. We can do a small get-together. Or maybe keep it private for now." I considered it. Part of me wanted to shout it from the rooftops. Another part wanted to hold the moment close, keep it ours for a while. "Let's keep it to ourselves just a bit," I said gently, brushing a stray tear from her cheek. "We've got the rest of our lives to tell the world." She grinned, cheeks flushed with happiness. "Deal." We lingered in the house, wandering from room to room, imagining where we'd put the sofa, a bookshelf, the paint colors. The ring caught the light every time Emily gestured or tucked her hair behind an ear. It felt surreal, as though we'd stepped into a hopeful dream. But it was real. Before we left, we locked up carefully, and she looked back at the dark foyer. "It's a bit intimidating, how much renovation we need to do," she admitted. I shrugged, sliding my arm around her waist. "We'll figure it out, step by step." That was more than just about the house. It was about my entire future. I'd come a long way from being the bitter detective haunted by betrayal. Now, with Emily by my side, I was learning that steps toward tomorrow could be a real, tangible path. In the car on the way back, Emily fell asleep, leaning against the window. Her phone chimed with a message from Nick, likely another detail about the upcoming trial. I let her rest, absorbing the quiet city lights. My mind drifted to the night I found Fiona cheating, the raw pain that consumed me. That pain was still a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I had found a second chance at love, at life, at trust. As we pulled up to my apartment, I parked and gently shook Emily awake. She stirred, smiling that soft, sleepy smile. "Home?" she asked, glancing around. "Yeah," I said, brushing a kiss across her forehead. "But soon we'll have a new home." My voice quivered with both excitement and the lingering echo of old wounds. But that echo felt quieter now, overshadowed by the promise in her gaze. I helped her out of the car, the ring on her finger glinting under the street lamp. The future waited, a future that might hold challenges, a public trial, personal growth, and yes, the specter of old betrayals. But for once, I didn't feel fear. I felt hope, because we were stepping forward together, forging something good in the space where bitterness once reigned. And that, I realized, was the greatest triumph of all. I used to believe my most terrifying moments involved running down alleys after armed suspects or staking out in the dead of night. But standing outside a towering courthouse on a chilly morning, my heart thumped with a different kind of fear. Today marked the start of Andrew Blackwood's long-awaited trial. Cameras flashed as I stood near the steps, scanning for any sign of Cassandra or Nick Barnes. A small crowd had gathered, reporters, curious bystanders, and the occasional local activist shouting for justice through a megaphone. It felt surreal, remembering how I once quietly slipped around this city as a private investigator, overshadowed by the scandal from my old police days. Now I was front and center in a high-profile case. The thought made my stomach churn. "Marcus!" a familiar voice called. Emily Collins emerged from the throng, hurrying toward me with a concerned look. She wore a fitted coat that kept out the brisk wind. "You okay?" she asked, placing a hand gently on my arm. I exhaled. "Yeah, I'm good, just anxious. The defense is going to dig into my past, try to paint me as a rogue ex-cop." She squeezed my arm reassuringly. "Don't let them rattle you. You have the truth, and Nick's behind you. Cassandra is too." I glanced at the courthouse entrance. "Let's get this over with." Inside, the lobby bustled with attorneys juggling thick briefcases and phone calls. I spotted Nick near a security checkpoint, looking tense in a tailored suit. He beckoned for me to join him. Emily gave my hand a final squeeze and said she'd find a seat in the gallery. I nodded, grateful for her presence, then moved through the metal detector to meet Nick. "Big day, huh?" he said, voice low. "Feels like the biggest," I replied, scanning the corridor. "Where's Cassandra?" Nick gestured at a side hallway. "She's with the DA, prepping for her testimony. She's holding up okay, but you know it's rough. Andrew's lawyers have been hinting they'll attack her character." My jaw tightened. "She's strong. She'll tell the truth no matter what they throw at her." Nick nodded. "We just need to stay calm on the stand. Don't rise to any bait." Stepping into the courtroom, I felt that hush unique to legal proceedings, polished wood benches, the judge's elevated desk, the jury box to one side. Andrew sat at the defense table in a crisp suit, flanked by two formidable-looking attorneys. He radiated an icy calm, barely glancing my way, though I sensed the tension behind his eyes. The judge, a middle-aged woman named Judge Franklin, arrived promptly. The bailiff called the court to order and the trial began. Prosecutors laid out their opening statements with a methodical calm, describing how Andrew allegedly orchestrated the murder of Gabriel Myers, threatened Cassandra, and hired Wyatt Thorne for intimidation. The defense's opening was equally forceful, insisting that Andrew was a victim of false accusations by a scorned spouse and an overzealous ex-cop, namely me. My turn to testify came mid-morning. My pulse pounded as I took the stand, raising my right hand to swear to tell the truth. Once seated, the prosecutor, a sharp-eyed man named Harmon, approached with a measured smile. "Mr. Pierce," he began, "you're a private investigator who initially took a job from Andrew Blackwood, correct?" I cleared my throat. "Yes." "He hired me to gather evidence on his wife, Cassandra, under the suspicion of infidelity." "And what did you discover?" I recounted how I trailed Cassandra, finding only emotional closeness to Gabriel, nothing that confirmed an affair. I watched Andrew's expression remain stoic, though I saw a flicker in his jaw at the mention of Gabriel's name. "And did you witness any threatening behavior by the defendant toward Cassandra?" Harmon asked. I described Andrew's escalating demands for proof, his veiled threats, and how I came to suspect him of deeper wrongdoing after Gabriel's suspicious death. Harmon nodded as I detailed finding evidence of Andrew's large cash withdrawals and eventually linking him to Wyatt Thorne's intimidation tactics. Next came the defense's cross-examination. Just as Nick had warned, they went for my jugular. A tall defense lawyer with a razor-sharp voice, Miss Wilcox, stepped up. "Mr. Pierce," she said, flipping through papers, "you're a former police officer who left under controversial circumstances, correct?" I swallowed. "Yes, I was forced out after an incident involving my captain." "An incident?" She feigned a sympathetic smile. "You assaulted your superior officer, correct?" My neck prickled. "I defended myself after discovering a personal betrayal," I stated, careful not to elaborate. "But yes, it led to my dismissal." Wilcox's gaze flicked to the jury as though sharing a secret. "So you have a history of violence and personal grudges. Would it be fair to say you harbor resentment toward men in authority like Andrew Blackwood?" I forced myself to remain calm. "No, I don't resent men in authority. I resent injustice. I found evidence linking Andrew to criminal acts, that's all." She leaned in, voice laced with condescension. "Isn't it true you pursued Andrew with a personal vendetta after the fiasco with your ex-wife and ex-boss?" My breath caught. My mind flashed to that humiliating day, but I remembered Emily's words, "Don't let them rattle you." "I took on Andrew's case as a paid investigator," I said, voice steady. "I had no vendetta. I only realized the danger he posed after seeing the evidence and witnessing his behavior. That's what led me to work with the police." Wilcox pressed a bit more, but each question felt like a rehash of my past. I refused to let her see me sweat. Eventually, she pivoted to an attempt to undermine the financial records I discovered, claiming they were coincidental. But I stood my ground, pointing out the suspicious timing. Finally, she ended with a tight-lipped nod, returning to her seat. I exhaled, fighting the swirl of old anger that threatened to surface. The judge dismissed me, and I stepped down, rejoining Nick on a bench near the back. Emily caught my eye from the gallery, offering a small, encouraging smile. I wanted to collapse, but it wasn't over yet. Cassandra would testify next, and her ordeal would likely be even more emotionally draining. Sure enough, Cassandra took the stand after lunch. She spoke bravely about her fears, Andrew's controlling nature, and how Gabriel had died right when he tried to stand up for her. The defense tried to paint her as unstable, but Cassandra refused to buckle. When they questioned her motives, implying she invented Andrew's threats to secure money in a divorce, her voice shook with quiet outrage. "I would rather have been penniless than live another day under Andrew's control," she said. "He used intimidation and money to manipulate everyone around him. Ask Wyatt Thorne, who paid him to corner me at night." From the corner of my eye, I noticed Andrew's composure cracking. His fists clenched, lips pressed in a tight line. The tension in the room was tangible. By the end of the day, Cassandra left the stand visibly shaken, but her testimony rang with authenticity. Outside the courtroom, journalists clamored for quotes. I shielded Cassandra from the crowd, Nick beside me, as we navigated the barrage of flashing cameras. She clutched my arm, whispering, "We said what needed to be said." Nick nodded. "One day down. Let's see how the next sessions go. They might call Wyatt Thorne or present his recorded confession." Cassandra's eyes darted nervously. I just want this over. I placed a hand on her shoulder. We're close, I promised. As we stepped away from the courthouse, Emily joined us. She looped her arm through mine. You were great on the stand, she murmured. I'm proud of you. A swirl of exhaustion washed over me. Thanks. I thought back to Wilcox's questions about my past, how she tried to paint me as a violent, vengeful man. But I reminded myself that the truth was on our side. Andrew's guilt was woven into the money trail and Thorne's confession. The next days of testimony would hopefully solidify the prosecution's case. That night, I retreated to the new house with Emily. We had barely started renovating, so the living room was a mess of drop cloths and paint cans. But we sat cross-legged on the floor, sharing takeout Chinese, the day's events swirling in our heads. Do you regret pursuing Andrew? Emily asked softly, fiddling with a chopstick. I gazed at her, the gentle lamp we'd set up casting shadows on the half-painted walls. No, I said, my voice quieter than usual. Gabriel deserved justice. Cassandra deserved freedom. And we needed to end Andrew's reign of terror. Even if the defense tries to smear me, I can't regret doing the right thing. Emily reached over, lacing her fingers with mine. Then let's get through this trial and move on with our lives. A wave of relief mingled with lingering tension. I brushed a kiss across her knuckles. Agreed. Outside, a faint wind rustled the trees. The house felt both unfinished and full of promise, much like my life at that moment. The trial had begun, and so had the final battle for closure. I just hoped we'd weather the storm of cross-examinations and defense attacks without losing sight of why we fought in the first place, to see a powerful manipulator finally face the consequences of his betrayals. 3 weeks into the trial, the tension was thick enough to taste. Each day brought new witnesses and new angles from the defense, but the prosecution held steady. They presented a chronological tapestry. Andrew's suspicious bank withdrawals, Wyatt Thorne's coerced confession, Cassandra's heartfelt testimony about intimidation, and my investigative findings. The media devoured it all, branding Andrew the millionaire puppet master. Inside the courtroom, Andrew sat stiff, sometimes glaring at me or Cassandra when he thought no one else was looking. On the final day of closing arguments, the prosecution hammered home the theme. Andrew orchestrated Gabriel's murder to maintain control, then threatened Cassandra to preserve his wealth and reputation. The defense tried to spin a narrative of coincidences, painting me as a vengeful ex-cop and Cassandra as a gold digger. The jury seemed unimpressed by these attempts, though it was hard to read their expressions. By the time the jury went into deliberation, we were all drained. Cassandra paced the courthouse corridor, stopping occasionally to sip water and check her phone. Nick sat on a bench, drumming his fingers on his knee. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, quietly praying the evidence we presented outweighed the defense's smokescreens. Emily, who had been attending every major session, offered me an encouraging half-smile. No matter what, you did everything you could, she whispered, sliding her hand into mine. I squeezed her fingers in gratitude. Yeah, but I need them to see Andrew for what he is. My mind flashed back to Gabriel's face in old photos, the strong sense that I was fighting on behalf of a man who never got the chance to speak for himself in court. When the bailiff announced the jury had reached a verdict, my heart thundered. We reassembled in the courtroom, a hush settling as the jury filed back in. Judge Franklin directed the foreman to read the verdict. The foreman, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, glanced at the paper in his hand. On the count of first-degree murder, we find the defendant, Andrew Blackwood, guilty. A collective breath rippled through the room. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty. On the count of attempted murder, he paused, clearing his throat. Guilty. Time seemed to slow, the air thick with tension. Andrew's face contorted, a mask of fury and disbelief. His lawyer quickly demanded a poll of the jury, but each juror affirmed guilty on all major charges. The judge nodded, calling for order amid the murmurs and gasps. Cassandra clutched her chest, tears brimming. Nick pressed his lips together in a shaky smile, relief flooding his eyes. Andrew erupted from his chair, ignoring the judge's calls for silence. This is a farce, he shouted, voice echoing. "They're all lying. I was set up." The bailiff and an officer scrambled to restrain him, pushing him back into his seat. His lawyers tried to calm him, but Andrew's veneer of composure shattered, replaced by raw rage. Judge Franklin banged her gavel. "Order, Mr. Blackwood! Any further outbursts and I'll hold you in contempt. Sentencing will be scheduled at a later date, but you are remanded to custody until then." In that moment, I finally saw the powerful man for what he truly was, a desperate manipulator, undone by his own arrogance. My mind flashed to the day he first walked into my office, oozing entitlement, certain he could buy my loyalty. Now he stood, cuffed and raging, as the bailiff led him away. His eyes skimmed over me with pure hatred. I felt a grim satisfaction welling up inside, but also a sense of finality, a heavy door closing on a dark chapter. Reporters outside the courthouse exploded with questions. Cameras zoomed in on Cassandra, tears glistening on her cheeks. She mustered a brief statement. "Justice was served today. I'm grateful to everyone who stood by me, especially Marcus Pierce and Detective Nick Barnes." Then she hurried off with Nick, ignoring the barrage of follow-ups. Emily found me in the crush of onlookers, looping her arm around my waist. "It's over, Marcus," she whispered, her voice laced with relief. I nodded, letting out a slow breath. "Over," I echoed, still half in disbelief. I felt simultaneously weightless and exhausted, like I might float away if I let go of Emily's hand. A while later, I slipped out a side exit to avoid the main press scrum. Emily followed, and Nick caught up with us in the parking lot, a wry grin on his face. "I guess we did it," he said quietly. "Can't say Andrew didn't deserve every bit of that verdict." "No argument there," I said, leaning against my car, the autumn breeze ruffling my hair. "Thanks for sticking your neck out. I know some folks at the department weren't thrilled we pursued this so hard." Nick shrugged. "Some battles are worth fighting. And hey, might help me in my own career. Everyone loves a big conviction unless they were in Andrew's pocket." I gave a small laugh, tension still thrumming under my skin. "What about Cassandra? She's probably relieved, but also dealing with Gabriel's memory." "She's heading home to pack. She mentioned wanting a fresh start somewhere else, though she didn't say where." Emily sighed. I can't blame her. Too many memories here. A thoughtful silence followed. I pictured Cassandra driving away, leaving behind the city that had nearly swallowed her whole. Maybe it was best. I hoped she'd find peace. That night, the coverage of the verdict dominated every local channel. I sat in my living room, half watching the footage, half drifting in my own thoughts. The new house was still in the process of renovation, so Emily and I were between two places, our lives in boxes. She joined me on the couch, resting her head on my shoulder as the newscaster recapped Andrew's sentencing hearing, still pending. A highlight reel showed me on the stand briefly, then a shot of Andrew's meltdown after the verdict, face twisted in fury. "The once powerful businessman fell from grace," the anchor said. "Now he awaits sentencing, which could be life in prison given the severity of his crimes." I switched off the TV. "I've had enough of Andrew's face," I muttered, exhaustion evident in my tone. Emily nudged me softly. "You did what had to be done," she said, nestling closer. "You avenged Gabriel's death, saved Cassandra's life, and overcame your own demons in the process." I studied her gentle features, recalling how she'd stuck by me through every twist of this nightmare. My chest tightened with gratitude and something akin to a new beginning. "Not sure if I overcame all my demons," I admitted, thinking about the lingering resentment toward Captain Harper. "But I see them more clearly now. That's progress, I guess." She smiled, lifting the remote to cue up a mindless comedy show. "Then let's celebrate that progress, one day at a time." We spent the rest of the evening in quiet comfort, the lights dim, the faint sound of traffic outside. My phone buzzed a few times, messages from acquaintances or reporters wanting a comment. I ignored them all. I wanted no more spotlight, no more headlines about Andrew or the trial. Andrew was found guilty. The city could devour that story, spin it how they pleased. But for me, it meant closure, a final end to the betrayal he tried to orchestrate around Cassandra, the manipulations that cost Gabriel his life. I felt a bittersweet pang, remembering how this entire saga started with Andrew breezing into my office, waving money around for a simple domestic case. Now, in a twisted sense, his downfall was complete. Before drifting to sleep, I gave Emily a tired smile. "I'm done living in other people's shadows," I said quietly. "Time to focus on us." She kissed my forehead softly. "I'm ready," she whispered. And with that, I closed my eyes, drifting off into the first real restful slumber I'd had in years. A few days after the verdict, I received an unexpected phone call from a number I almost didn't recognize, Captain Joseph Harper, the man who once destroyed my marriage, my career, my faith in the badge. I stared at the buzzing phone for a solid 10 seconds before picking up. "Pierce," I said, curt. A pause. Then his voice, gruffer than I remembered, crackled through the line. "Marcus, I heard about Andrew's trial. Saw you all over the news. You actually pulled that off." His tone wasn't congratulatory, more like baffled or maybe resentful. I felt old anger stir. "What do you want, Harper?" He sighed. "Look, I'm not calling to fight. I heard rumors you might try to dredge up our old drama when you testified." Some of my guys were worried. I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping. "Your ego's still intact, I see. Don't worry. I had bigger fish to fry than rehashing your affair with my ex-wife." Silence. "Marcus, for what it's worth, I regret how things played out. Fiona and we never meant it to blow up like that. And after seeing you on the stand, I realized you're not the same hothead you used to be." My grip tightened on the phone. A swirl of emotions threatened to break my calm. "You made choices that cost me my badge and my marriage. You think an apology now changes that?" He hesitated. "No, I guess not. But it's been years. I'm not the same man either. I left the force last year, retirement mostly. I've had a lot of time to think." I closed my eyes, recalling how that single betrayal shaped so much of my life. Part of me wanted to unleash a torrent of blame. Another part felt tired, as though I'd carried this resentment far too long. He cleared his throat. "Anyway, I just wanted to say good job on exposing that scumbag Andrew. The city needed a wake-up call." A reluctant flicker of satisfaction sparked. Even if Harper was the last person I wanted to hear praise from, it meant something that even he recognized Andrew's guilt. "Thanks," I muttered, not sure how else to respond. A beat of awkward silence. Then Harper said, "I'm not expecting forgiveness, but I'm glad you found a second chance. Fiona told me you've moved on, that you're engaged." My pulse jumped at Fiona's name, but I forced it down. "Yes, engaged, starting fresh." He sighed. "Better than we ever did. Take care, Marcus." The call ended abruptly, leaving me unsettled. I realized I'd never truly had a final confrontation with Harper. He'd simply vanished after the settlement that forced me out of the department. Now, hearing him claim regret felt hollow, but it also felt clarifying. He wasn't some looming monster in my nightmares anymore. He was just a man who made bad choices, who'd inflicted damage on me that I'd since learned to mend. Emily noticed my mood that evening, asking in her gentle way, "Everything all right?" As she unpacked groceries in the new house's half-finished kitchen, I gave a faint shrug. Harper called. She paused, glancing my way with concern. "What did he want?" I relayed the gist of the conversation. She frowned. "That's random. Do you feel any better hearing his so-called remorse?" I considered it, leaning against the bare wall. "In a weird way, maybe. Not that it absolves him, but I guess I'm glad to see he's at least not gloating about how my life turned out. And I have to admit, I've changed since then." She set a box of cereal on the counter, stepping closer to me. "You have changed," she said softly. "You're not letting betrayal define you anymore." I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. Yeah, I guess him calling me was the final piece, like we needed that moment of acknowledgement to close the book. Her lips curved in a supportive smile. "I'm proud of you." After we finished organizing groceries, we sat on the living room floor, the same place where I'd proposed. The renovations were coming along slowly, but a fresh coat of paint on the walls gave the space a more welcoming aura. Emily handed me a mug of tea, and I sipped thoughtfully, replaying Harper's words in my mind. Do you think I should let it go? I asked, half to myself. She tucked a leg under herself. I think you already have, but maybe a final conversation with him if you need it would help you fully move on. I nodded, though I felt I'd said all that needed to be said. The next day, I texted Harper a simple note. I appreciate the call. We can leave the past where it is. He never responded, and I didn't expect him to. That was enough. 2 nights later, Nick swung by, bringing pizza and a grin. Heard from some old cops that Harper's basically persona non grata in certain circles, he said, chomping on a slice. Guess he burned enough bridges that nobody wants to keep in touch with him. I shrugged, taking a bite. He made his bed. Then I added quietly, but I'm done letting him haunt me. Nick flashed a rare, warm smile. Glad to hear it. You deserve peace. We spent the evening with Emily, flipping through potential designs for the house's new library nook. It felt surreal to be discussing paint colors and built-in shelves with the memory of courtrooms and arrests so fresh. But maybe that was what normal life looked like, ordinary tasks overshadowing old vendettas. Are you inviting your mom to the wedding? Nick teased, swirling his soda. The question was casual, but it hinted at the future we'd only begun to plan. Emily shot me a playful look, and I chuckled. Probably. I guess we'll figure out the guest list soon. Doesn't have to be huge, just the people who matter. My mind flitted to Cassandra, who was relocating to another city. I made a mental note to invite her if she wanted to come. At one point, I caught Nick staring at the ring on Emily's finger, a reflective longing in his eyes. Remembering he'd mentioned trouble in his marriage, I gently asked if there was any progress. He gave a half shrug, half smile. We're still in counseling, one day at a time. Seeing your happiness gives me hope we can figure it out too. Emily raised her glass. Here's to second chances for everyone, she said. We toasted with soda, the clink of plastic cups ironically celebratory. That night, as Emily and I wound down, we found ourselves discussing the call from Harper once more. You know, she said, curling into my side, the day we met, you were so guarded, like you couldn't trust anyone. Now look at you. You faced Andrew, got closure with Fiona, and even had a conversation with Harper. You're not that same wounded man. My chest tightened with gratitude. I owe you for that, I whispered, for reminding me life can keep going after betrayal. She kissed my shoulder. We're partners now. That's how it should be. As I drifted off to sleep, I reflected on how right she was. The anger that once fueled my every step had eased, replaced by a steady resolve. Captain Harper was just another broken man from my past, overshadowed by the promise of new beginnings. By morning, I woke with a sense of lightness I hadn't known in years. Closure is a strange thing, less a grand finale, and more a quiet shift. Harper's call was the final piece of that shift, confirming that nothing tethered me to old resentments. Andrew's conviction ensured he couldn't cause more harm. Fiona had apologized, and Harper, for whatever reasons, expressed regret. Maybe none of them fully made amends, but it didn't matter. I was done fighting shadows. The next day, I found myself at the hardware store with Emily, picking out tiles for the new kitchen backsplash. Such a mundane task, yet it symbolized how far I'd come. Each tile we debated was a small, tangible step away from the chaos of my old life. A life once dominated by betrayal and vengeance, now replaced by the hope of building something good. A crisp autumn wind swept through the front yard of our new home, rustling leaves across the driveway. I paused on the porch, taking in the facade, freshly painted trim, new windows, a brand new doorbell that Emily insisted we install. The renovations weren't finished, but the house already looked transformed from the time we first set eyes on it. Inside, the living room smelled faintly of sawdust and fresh paint. Sunlight streamed through the cleaned-up windows, illuminating the hardwood floors we'd spent hours sanding and polishing. It was far from perfect. Boxes still lined the hallway, and the kitchen's backsplash project remained half done. But it felt like home. Emily bustled around, setting a vase of flowers on the mantel, her eyes bright with satisfaction. "Looks decent, right?" she asked, brushing a stray hair from her face. "A few more weekends of work and we might actually have a fully functional house." I grinned, leaning against the newly installed banister. "Decent," It's amazing. Remember how it looked before? Like a dusty relic. Her laughter echoed off the walls. Now it's ours. We made something beautiful out of it, just like we promised each other. A warmth spread through my chest. This house stood as a tangible symbol of how far I'd come from the bitterness of my old life to this new, hopeful chapter. I stepped closer, slipping an arm around Emily's waist. She tilted her head against my shoulder, a contented sigh escaping her lips. We wandered through the halls, imagining how we'd arrange the guest bedroom or the study. Every so often, I'd recall a fleeting memory of my life with Fiona, how different that had been. But the sting was gone, replaced by a settled acceptance that I was exactly where I needed to be now. A knock on the partially open front door made us jump. I turned to see Nick stepping inside, a bottle of sparkling cider in his hand. "Knock, knock," he called, a sheepish grin on his face. "Mind if I crash your housewarming?" Emily beamed, waving him in. "We can't call it a housewarming until we have furniture, but sure, come on in." Nick popped the cork, a small fizz filling the living room. We found plastic cups and toasted amid paint cans and drop cloths. "To new beginnings," Nick said, echoing a familiar sentiment we'd shared. "And to you two lovebirds." We drank, the cider sweet on my tongue. "What's the latest?" I asked Nick, half expecting some leftover drama from Andrew's sentencing or Harper's meddling. Nick shrugged. "Andrew's formal sentencing is set for next month. The DA's office expects him to get life. Cassandra's final statement really sealed the deal. She left a note for you, thanked you again, said she's heading west. New job, new life. She's hopeful." I nodded, a smile tugging at my lips. She deserves it. Nick turned to Emily, changing the subject to wedding details. "So any plans yet? Or are you two just winging it?" Emily laughed, glancing at me. "We're discussing. Maybe something small here at the house once it's fully renovated. We don't want a massive affair." I quirked a grin. "I've had enough attention from the press to last a lifetime. A quiet ceremony with close friends sounds perfect." Nick raised his cup in a mock salute. "Count me in. I'll even bring decent scotch if it's not too fancy for you." We all chuckled, enjoying the easy banter that replaced the tension of old investigations. Eventually, Nick left, and the house felt calmer again. Emily and I sat on the back porch, which overlooked a modest yard with a few scraggly trees. The late afternoon sun cast a warm glow over the grass, and a gentle breeze carried the faint scent of leaves turning. I found myself thinking about how my life had come full circle, from heartbreak and fury to quiet satisfaction. "Do you ever miss being a detective?" Emily asked, startling me from my reverie. I considered it, gazing at the yard. "I miss the sense of purpose sometimes, the camaraderie, but I'm building a new kind of purpose with my PI work, and the big cases don't define me anymore." She nodded thoughtfully. "You've changed." I gave her a sideways smile. "And you, Miss Collins, changed me." Her cheeks tinted pink. "I just reminded you that trust and hope exist. You did the rest on your own." We talked about the future, how we might eventually rent out the old apartment, focus on the business, maybe even expand Pierce investigations with a partner. Then, our conversation drifted to bigger possibilities, traveling once we settle into married life, or even adopting a dog to romp around the yard. Each idea felt oddly attainable, no longer overshadowed by the specter of betrayal. A little later, we retreated inside, rummaging for dinner fixings. The kitchen was still half finished, so we made do with a portable stove and a small fridge we'd shoved against the wall. While I chopped vegetables, Emily scrolled through her phone, checking messages. "Have you heard from your mom?" she asked. "Will she come visit once the place is ready?" I shrugged. "She's out of state, but she's curious. She wants to meet you, definitely. She keeps saying she's proud of me for standing up in that trial." Emily's eyes crinkled in a smile. "Sounds like a good grandmother figure whenever if we, well, you know." She trailed off, a little bashful. My heart gave a small jolt. We hadn't explicitly talked about kids, but the notion felt less daunting than it once did. "Yeah," I said quietly, stirring the pasta. "Maybe someday." After dinner, we tidied up, the tap of water echoing in the mostly empty space. I stepped onto the front porch again, gazing at the darkening street. The lampposts glowed softly, highlighting the path we'd started to shape. This house stood as a testament to resilience, a reflection of how Emily and I had taken battered hearts and built something new, board by board, memory by memory. She joined me, leaning against the railing. "Penny, for your thoughts?" I slipped an arm around her, just thinking how we used to talk about a future without Andrew's shadow. Now that future's here. A hush settled between us, comfortable, warm. In the distance, a neighbor's dog barked and a car rumbled past. Everyday life sounds, mundane and precious. "You know," I said, my voice steady, "I spent years believing betrayal was the final word on everything. Fiona's affair, Harper's backstab, Andrew's manipulations. But I realize now those betrayals were just chapters, not the entire story." Emily smiled softly, resting her head on my shoulder. "So how does your story end?" I breathed in the crisp night air. "It doesn't. It keeps going. With you, with this house, with the PI work that actually helps people. I've still got ghosts, but they don't own me anymore." She pressed a gentle kiss to my cheek. "That's all I've ever wanted for you," she whispered. We stood there, letting the moment envelop us. My mind flickered to all the times I'd stared at darkness, feeling consumed by bitterness. Now I found myself gazing at the same night sky, but with a calm acceptance. This was what it meant to move forward, knowing the past shaped me but didn't define me. A new horizon, I thought, recalling the phrase Nick used. Indeed, the future stretched out like the yard behind us, a bit untamed, needing care and effort but holding infinite possibility. I drew Emily closer, listening to the hum of distant traffic, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. The scars of betrayal were still part of me, yet I was no longer haunted by them. Tomorrow I'd finalize a few more details on the house, maybe schedule a small dinner with friends. I'd keep running Pierce investigations, but with less of that old vigilante fury. I'd plan a wedding with Emily, invite Nick, maybe even Cassandra if she wanted to come back for a day. And somewhere in there, I'd keep healing, step by step. Looking forward, that was the path. For the first time, I let a genuine, unguarded smile break across my face. I was free, free from Harper, free from Fiona's betrayal, free from Andrew's manipulations. And I stood at the edge of a brighter tomorrow, hand in hand with the woman who helped me find my way there.